Hiraku Machio passes away from a terminal illness after spending years trapped in a hospital bed, living a miserable life full of betrayal and continuous hardship. He suddenly finds himself standing in a dark cosmic void confronting the god of the world. God openly admits that Hiraku's terrible life was actually partially his fault and a mistake on his end. To make up for this error, God offers to reincarnate Hiraku into an entirely new fantasy world, promising to give him a completely healthy body that will never succumb to any illnesses. Hiraku accepts the apology and the offer without much hesitation. When God asks if he has any specific requests for his next life, Hiraku explains that he was never a sociable person and spent his time watching farming shows on television. He asks to spend his second life working as a farmer in a peaceful location far away from any major civilization. God agrees to this request, consults quickly with the god of farming to get the proper jurisdiction, and grants Hiraku a special power called the omnipotent farming tool. With a final blessing, God sends Hiraku's soul down into the new world to start his second life. Hiraku wakes up lying on the rocky ground in the middle of a dense sun-drenched forest. He looks at his hands and realizes his body is young again. He jumps up and celebrates his new healthy physique, thrilled that he can finally stand and move freely after being bedridden for so many years. Determined to start his new life, he takes a moment to figure out his current situation. He notices he is dressed in simple clothes like a generic villager from a role-playing game, and is completely surrounded by massive, towering trees in every direction. Remembering the divine gift God gave him, he holds out his hand and summons the omnipotent farming tool. A glowing magic beam shoots into his palm and a golden hoe materializes in his hands. He tests the tool by striking the rocky ground with it. He discovers that the hoe effortlessly tills the hard soil and breaks straight through thick tree roots without making him feel tired at all. He scoops up a handful of the freshly tilled dirt and finds it to be incredibly soft and fluffy. He realizes he could grow amazing vegetables in this soil, but he knows he needs to secure a reliable source of water and food before he can start a proper farm. He decides to explore the forest to listen for a river, but the woods are incredibly dense and he cannot hear any running water over the rustling leaves. He cannot even find any basic edible plants or grass to forage. After walking through the thick brush for a while, he stumbles upon a colossal ancient tree that towers over the rest of the canopy. He decides to use this massive tree as a central landmark and sets up his base camp right next to it. Since there is no river nearby, Hiraku decides he has to dig a well himself. He changes his farming tool into a pair of wooden dowsing sticks to try and locate an underground water vein. When that method proves far too confusing for him to understand, he simply transforms the tool into a heavy metal shovel. He starts digging a massive hole right next to the giant tree root. The magical tool allows him to dig endlessly without experiencing any physical fatigue. However, he soon realizes he dug straight down into the earth and cannot climb out of the deep vertical hole. He quickly adapts to his mistake and uses the shovel to dig a diagonal tunnel upward until he breaks through to the surface. During his excavation, his shovel strikes something solid in the dirt and a burst of fresh water erupts from the ground. He successfully secures a water source on his very first attempt and thanks God for his incredibly good luck. With his water supply taken care of, he shifts his focus to finding food. Strangely, he realizes he does not feel hungry at all, suspecting it might be another perk of his new healthy body or the magical farming tool. Deciding it is too dangerous to wander around the forest looking for food right now, Hiraku chooses to clear the immediate area and build a temporary shelter. He transforms his tool into a large axe to chop down a massive tree that is blocking his future farming space. He plans out exactly where to strike the trunk, but when he swings the axe, the entire tree is instantly cut down in a single devastating blow, sending up a massive cloud of dust and leaving him completely shocked by the tool's sheer destructive power. He changes the tool into a sharp hatchet and easily strips the branches and bark off the fallen logs, noting that the hard wood cuts as smoothly as cheese. He then turns the tool into a hook to drag the heavy timber around, fully realizing the omnipotent farming tool can transform into literally any tool he can vividly picture in his mind. He manages to gather a good amount of processed timber, but quickly realizes he has absolutely no idea how to build a proper hut from scratch without any nails or adhesives. He notices the shadow on a wooden pillar getting longer and realizes the sun is rapidly setting. Panicking about the approaching darkness, he tries to summon a flashlight or a lamp, but the tool refuses to transform into complicated modern machines. He then tries to summon a lighter or a match, but he worries he might permanently lose the tool if it turns into a consumable item that burns away. Finally, he figures out a clever loophole and transforms the tool into a simple magnifying glass. He uses the last remaining rays of the setting sun to focus a beam of light onto a pile of wood shavings and successfully starts a campfire. With no time left to build a real house, he uses a chisel tool to hollow out a small cave inside the giant tree trunk. He spends his first night sleeping inside the tree hollow, using his newly made campfire for warmth. He notices he can see surprisingly well in the dark, wondering if it is due to his enhanced body or the bright light coming from the two massive moons hanging in the night sky. The next morning, Hiraku uses his magnifying glass to start another fire and continues clearing the land around his camp. He changes his tool into a scythe and a pickaxe to remove stubborn tree stumps and thick bushes. Although the tool prevents him from feeling any muscle fatigue, he realizes he still burns physical energy while working, and his stomach finally starts rumbling with hunger. He decides he has to venture out for food, but suddenly, a massive gray rabbit monster with glowing red eyes and sharp fangs charges straight out of the bushes and attacks him. In a sheer panic, Hiraku blindly swings his scythe to defend himself and accidentally decapitates the terrifying beast in a single hit. Shaken but relieved to be alive, he butchers the giant rabbit with a knife formed from his tool and roasts the chunks of meat over his campfire. The meat tastes a bit gamey and reeks of blood, but he is incredibly grateful to finally have something solid to eat. After satisfying his hunger, he realizes he needs a proper place to relieve himself. He spends hours constructing a highly functional wooden toilet next to his camp. He builds a comfortable seat out of a hollowed log, digs a deep underground tank for the waste, and even installs proper ventilation pipes to handle the smell. He feels very proud of his civilized creation and considers it a major upgrade to his living situation. With his basic survival needs finally met, Hiraku turns a large patch of land into a proper agricultural field using a silver-headed hoe. He wishes he could plant potatoes, onions, tomatoes, cucumbers, or corn, but he has absolutely no seeds or seedlings to work with. He figures he will have to forage for some later and goes to sleep. However, when he wakes up the following morning, he is shocked to find tiny green sprouts miraculously growing in every single row of his tilled soil. He is not sure if the plants magically appeared because of the world's nature or because of the power of his farming tool, but he is thrilled to have crops growing. Realizing he desperately needs to protect his new farm from other giant rabbits or unknown monsters, he immediately gets to work building defenses. He uses his tool to chop more wood and builds a sturdy log fence completely surrounding the entire field. Then, he uses his shovel to dig a deep rectangular trench on the outside of the fence for an extra layer of protection. Over the next few days, he successfully defends his farm by killing more giant rabbits that try to break through his barriers, using their meat as his primary food source. He also discovers that using a watering can formed from his tools significantly speeds up the growth of his mysterious crops, making him incredibly excited to see what kind of vegetables they will turn into. Tired of living in a cramped tree trunk, Hiraku decides to finally build a proper house for himself. He digs a shallow pit in the ground to gain some extra interior height, then carefully stacks heavy notched wooden beams to form the sturdy walls of a log cabin. He secures a roof made of thick tree bark using wooden pegs he carved by hand. The finished cabin features small windows for natural light and is a massive upgrade from his temporary tree hollow. With a real roof over his head and his crops growing steadily, he feels incredibly motivated and starts genuinely enjoying his peaceful everyday life. One afternoon, while inspecting his farm, Hiraku spots two massive black wolves with glowing red eyes standing just outside his fence. At first, he is terrified by their sheer size and battle scars, but he notices they are not trying to attack him or his crops. He bridges the trench with a wooden plank and cautiously approaches them. Seeing that they are injured and starving, he grabs some raw boar meat from a recent hunt and feeds it to them directly. He quickly realizes the female wolf has a bulging stomach and is heavily pregnant, while the male is likely just protecting her. Hiraku remembers always wanting a dog as a child and hopes these wolves will stick around to help guard his farm. Suddenly, the female wolf collapses and goes into labor right there in the dirt. Panicking, Hiraku carries the heavy wolves inside his newly built log cabin so they can be safe and warm. He sets up a small fire near the entrance to keep the temperature comfortable, then retreats to a nearby rocky cave to give them space. He worries that he might be interfering too much and fears a monster might attack them while they are vulnerable. He ends up falling asleep in the cave. When he wakes up the next morning, he rushes back to the cabin and is overjoyed to find 4 healthy little black puppies nursing alongside their mother. The male wolf happily watches over his new family. Hiraku decides to name the adult wolves Kuro and Yuki and names the 4 puppies Kuroichi, Kuroni, Kurosan, and Kuroyan. Recognizing that the wolf family has completely claimed his log cabin, Hiraku does not have the heart to kick them out, so he gathers more wood and builds a second, even better cabin for himself to live in. Soon, the mysterious crops in his field are finally ready to harvest. He discovers that the plants are actually tomatoes, and although they are a bit small and tough to pick from the thick vines, they are perfectly ripe and delicious. Kuro and Yuki start hunting game and patrolling the surrounding forest to protect the farm, but Hiraku is surprised to find that the carnivorous wolves also love eating his raw tomatoes. Seeing the fearsome beasts happily munch on his vegetables fills him with joy and motivates him to grow even more crops to feed his growing family. With his fields expanding and his harvest coming in rapidly, Hiraku realizes he needs to build a dedicated storage hut to keep all the food safe from spoiling. He stands in the middle of his thriving farm, looking at his sturdy cabins, his protective fence, his loyal wolves, and his vibrant crops. He knows he still has a lot of furniture to build and work to do, but he fully embraces the challenge, ready to slowly and peacefully enjoy his second life as a farmer. Meanwhile, up in the cosmos, God decides to check in on Hiraku to see how he is doing in his new life. God reflects on his job regarding the salvation of souls and admits that even he makes mistakes sometimes. He realizes he accidentally bestowed a life of immense suffering upon Hiraku in his previous life, and in his attempt to make up for it, he might have messed up again. God notices that he completely accidentally dropped Hiraku right into the middle of the Forest of Death, a place filled with insanely dangerous and wicked monsters. God panics because Hiraku is entirely alone in a deadly nightmare and was told to just sustain himself by farming. God desperately wants to pull him back out, but he knows he cannot break his own rules and interfere now that Hiraku's new life has officially started. All God can do is watch and hope Hiraku survives, praying that if Hiraku dies and returns as a soul, he will accept his apology. Back on the farm, Hiraku is completely unaware of the extreme danger surrounding him and just focuses on his crops. He quickly figures out the exact mechanics of the omnipotent farming tool. He realizes that whatever plant he vividly pictures in his mind while tilling the dirt magically sprouts into existence. He tests this theory by imagining eggplants, spinach, and bean sprouts while swinging his hoe. Almost instantly, little green sprouts pop out of the soft soil. The crops grow ridiculously fast under his care. In fact, he plants some potatoes and they grow so incredibly fast that he finds himself overwhelmed. He notices that the potatoes exposed to the direct sun turn green. Hiraku remembers from his past life that green potato sprouts are actually poisonous, so he decides it is way too risky to eat them. To prevent this from happening again, he uses his tool to mound up the dirt around the base of the potato plants to block out the sun entirely. He admits he does not know much about real agricultural techniques, but he is determined to learn from his mistakes and keep improving his farm. Feeling incredibly grateful for his new healthy life, Hiraku uses his tool to carve two small wooden statues out of thick logs. He makes one statue of God holding a staff and another of the god of farming holding a tool, placing them in a small shrine to show his appreciation. He feels like his primitive lifestyle is slowly becoming much more civilized. For lunch, he cooks up a hearty stew using rabbit meat and his freshly grown, pesticide-free vegetables. He notices the meat is much easier to eat and tastes far better because he carefully drains the blood right after killing the animals. The wolves absolutely love the properly prepared meat as well, and Hiraku worries he might actually be spoiling them with such good food. His only real complaint is that the stew is completely unseasoned because he does not have any salt to flavor the broth. Hoping to eventually improve his diet, Hiraku decides to plant some fruit trees. He imagines apples, pears, and persimmons while tilling the soil. He knows fruit trees usually take several years to produce anything edible, but he is perfectly fine with waiting as long as it takes. Since his wolf companions are naturally great at navigating the dense woods without getting lost, Hiraku starts exploring much further away from his camp. He eventually discovers a river with a small waterfall about a 30-minute walk away. He decides to use this as a primary water source and plans to dig a long canal to bring the running water directly to his farm. He knows it will take a massive amount of digging, but he is ready to work on it little by little. He even builds a wooden outhouse near the construction site so he does not have to run all the way back home. To speed up his travel time, he transforms his magical farming tool into a wheelbarrow. He loads Kuro into the wheelbarrow and starts running through the forest at full speed. Since the tool prevents him from experiencing any physical fatigue, he runs way too fast, loses complete control, and ends up tumbling straight off a steep cliff with his wolf. They both hit the ground hard but manage to survive the fall just fine. After recovering, Hiraku decides he really needs to clear out the trees and build proper, flat roads before trying to use wheeled vehicles again. Back at the home base, he expands his fields even more and starts growing wheat, sugarcane for sweetness, and rapeseed to eventually harvest oil. His bean sprouts finish growing and turn into fully mature soybeans. Hiraku really wants to eat some fresh edamame, but he realizes he absolutely needs salt to prepare it properly, leaving him feeling mildly frustrated. Soon, the weather starts getting much colder, and Hiraku spots snow gathering on the distant mountain peaks. He realizes winter is approaching fast, and he needs warm clothes immediately. He tries to use the pelts from the giant rabbits he killed, but they smell absolutely terrible, and he worries they will just start rotting, so he throws them aside. His only remaining plan is to gather enough firewood and food to just stay locked inside his cabin all winter. One day, while working outside, Kuro starts acting aggressive. Hiraku turns around and is absolutely shocked to see a massive dark-furred giant spider with white stripes hanging out right in his camp. He initially thinks it is a giant seat cushion and prepares for a monster fight, but the spider just waves its front legs at him peacefully. The spider then uses its glowing white webbing to magically tailor a high-quality, perfectly embroidered handkerchief for him. Hiraku is amazed by the incredible craftsmanship and realizes the terrifying giant spider is actually completely friendly. He names the spider Zabuton and gladly lets her live up in the giant tree near his cabin. Zabuton turns out to absolutely love eating his grown potatoes and quickly becomes a highly valued member of the farm. She takes the stinky rabbit pelts Hiraku threw away and somehow purifies them, turning them into a beautiful fur-lined green winter coat for him. Hiraku tries it on and is incredibly happy to finally have something to keep out the freezing cold. He also gets Zabuton to make soft bedsheets stuffed with leaves and thick curtains for his windows, instantly making his cabin feel like a comfortable, civilized home. Winter finally hits hard, blanketing the entire forest in a thick layer of snow. Hiraku stays inside his cozy, firelit cabin with the wolves while Zabuton hibernates up in her massive tree. He spends his days eating steaming hot potatoes by the fireplace, but he still constantly wishes he had some rock salt to flavor his repetitive meals. Eventually, the heavy snow causes the roof of his original, poorly built cabin to completely buckle and collapse inward. Hiraku gets a bit panicked about his own safety, but his main cabin holds up just fine. Despite having more than enough food and warmth to survive, Hiraku starts feeling incredibly lonely. He realizes he has not spoken a single word to another human being in months, and genuinely worries he might actually forget how to talk. Eventually, the cold eases up, the snow melts away, and spring officially arrives. Kuro and Yuki's four-horned puppies are finally old enough to leave the nest. They head off into the deep forest to find mates, leaving Hiraku feeling a mix of sadness and pride. However, just a few days later, all four of the young wolves return, and each one brings back a new partner, rapidly expanding the pack. Around the same time, Zabuton climbs down from her tree and introduces Hiraku to a whole swarm of tiny baby spiders she just birthed. Hiraku is thrilled to see his farm's family growing so quickly, but he realizes it also means he has a lot more mouths to feed. He immediately gets back to work, using his glowing hoe to quickly till more land and drastically expand his vegetable fields. One afternoon, Zabuton suddenly starts ringing a wooden alarm board she set up in the trees. Kuro quickly leads Hiraku deep into the dense forest. They arrive at a clearing and find a young white-haired elf girl completely bound in Zabuton's thick spiderwebs. Hiraku is utterly shocked to finally see another person, but he wonders why she looks like a little kid and why she is tied up at the base of a tree. The girl cries out for help, and Hiraku quickly stops his wolves from growling at her. She explains that they attacked her, but she admits she actually attacked them first. She thought she could easily take on one of the wolves, but they easily overpowered her. She also reveals that she currently looks like a little kid because she exhausted all her magical energy fighting them and cannot maintain her true adult form. Feeling a little bad for her and just happy to hear another voice, Hiraku offers to let her suck his blood so she can recover her strength. The girl gladly bites his neck and drinks his blood, but Hiraku does not feel any pain or fatigue at all thanks to his divinely enhanced health. The girl is absolutely amazed by how incredibly vibrant and full of vitality his blood is. Suddenly, her body is engulfed in a bright pink and white magical light, and she transforms from a little kid back into a beautiful young woman with a black dress and a blue gem pendant. She introduces herself as Lulu Lucy and explains that she is a vampire. Lu is absolutely amazed by the thriving farm Hiraku built in the middle of nowhere. She runs around the fields joyfully, completely fascinated by the crops, since she has never seen things like tomatoes before. Hiraku magically summons a pair of scissors with his tool and cuts a fresh red tomato for her to try. Lu takes a huge bite and is completely blown away by how juicy and delicious it is. Hiraku gives her a full tour of the farm, enthusiastically pulling up massive radishes from the dirt and showing off his incredibly tall corn stalks. As the sun sets, they head inside the warm cabin. Lu uses her magic to create a glowing blue holographic display to help her study the vegetables. She explains that she is a magical researcher specializing in medicinal plants. She ended up hiding in the forest because she got into a nasty fight with some nobles who actively tried to steal her research, so she fled to lay low. She mentions that she almost died out here and points out that the area totally lives up to its savage reputation as the infamous Forest of Death. Hiraku is completely clueless and asks what she means. Lu is utterly shocked that he lives here without knowing he is in the deadliest forest in the world, and she cannot believe he actually managed to tame ferocious, high-tier monsters like the horned wolves and the giant demon spider. Hiraku just brushes it off, still not fully understanding the extreme danger. Lu asks about his farming tool, wondering if the magical scissors he created are some kind of rare artifact. Hiraku simply agrees it probably is a magic tool. Lu admits she has lived a very long life but has never seen anything quite like this place. She then asks Hiraku if it would be alright for her to stay at the farm for a while to continue her research in peace. Before she can even finish her sentence, Hiraku slams his wooden cup on the table and loudly asks her to stay and live with him forever. Lu is completely caught off guard by the sudden intense proposal. She blushes intensely and stammers, pointing out that they literally just met today. Hiraku firmly states that he does not care about that at all. He admits he is not great with people and originally wanted to live entirely alone, but the sheer isolation of the winter almost broke him mentally. He desperately wants someone to talk to and refuses to let this perfect chance slip away. Lu warns him again that dangerous people are actively looking for her, but Hiraku loudly insists he does not care. She reminds him she is a literal vampire and he still does not care one bit. Touched by his raw sincerity and having nowhere else to go, Lu finally agrees to stay, though she is still incredibly flustered by how fast everything is moving. Hiraku does not fully realize he basically just proposed marriage to her until Lu points it out directly. He panics for a second, but then entirely doubles down, performing a dramatic prostration bow on the floor and begging her to accept his proposal. Lu laughs off his panic and agrees again. Hiraku is so incredibly happy he literally grabs her and flies off into the night sky to celebrate under the moonlight while she screams for him to slow down. The next morning, Lu meets Hiraku out in the fields, having intentionally shrunk back into her child form. Hiraku asks why she did that and she explains it is for her own protection so he does not try to touch her inappropriately. Hiraku awkwardly promises to restrain himself. He is just incredibly happy to simply be able to say good morning to someone else. He tells her he is planning to grow sweet potatoes next since they are easy to prepare, preserve well, and there are more people to feed now. He points out that Lu is technically the very first human villager to move in. Lu is confused by the term villager, so Hiraku explains that the wolves and spiders were living here first. Counting all the animals and insects, he tells Lu that she is actually the 30th villager to join the farm. Lu just giggles, finding the specific title absolutely ridiculous. They start discussing how to grow her magical medicinal herbs in his fields, and Hiraku casually reveals he does not even need actual seeds to grow things. He explains he just has to imagine the plant, and his magical tool does all the work. Lu is absolutely stunned by his reality-bending power. With a new companion firmly by his side, Hiraku looks forward to expanding his peaceful farming life, completely ready to see what kind of magical plants they can create together now that he finally has someone to share his new world with. Hiraku and Lu are having a meal of thick meat and asparagus. Hiraku notes that it has a very mild flavor and asks Lu if she just prefers not to use salt. Hiraku explains that he actually wants to use salt but simply cannot find any around the forest, which frustrates him. Lu notices his intense and slightly pained expression and tells him that she can help. She points out that the dirt he has been digging up to make the farm actually contains a lot of salt deposits. She explains that they can dissolve this specific dirt in water and then boil it down to extract the pure salt. Hiraku feels a bit silly for not noticing it while he was digging all those holes. Later that morning, Hiraku checks on the new fruit trees he planted. He tells Lu that he transplanted oranges and peaches into the soil and thinks he might try planting chestnuts next. He notes that the fruit trees take much longer to grow than the regular vegetables. They sit together on a wooden log in the clearing to enjoy some tea. Hiraku drinks the herbal tea Lu made, but he secretly wishes he could have some traditional green tea instead. He remembers that oolong and black tea are made from the same leaves, but he pushes the thought aside for now. Suddenly, Hiraku senses a commotion deep in the woods. He rushes over to investigate and finds a blonde girl with large white feathered wings cowering on the ground. She is surrounded by several of Kuro's horned wolves, and is terrified, begging them for forgiveness and apologizing for attacking them first. Hiraku recognizes the classic situation and calls the wolves off. He asks the winged girl if she is alright and she quickly recovers. To show off her skills, she manifests glowing green and cyan magical energy from her fingertips, proving that she is quite capable. Hiraku is amazed by her magic and thinks it must be very convenient. Suddenly, Lu rushes onto the scene and immediately starts yelling at the blonde girl, calling her Tia. Tia is shocked to see Lu hiding in this random forest and demands that Lu surrender quietly. The wolves surround Tia again, causing a chaotic scuffle until Hiraku intervenes and brings everyone back to his wooden cabin to calm down. Inside the cabin, Tia and Lu sit at the table and discuss their shared trauma of dealing with the ruthless horned wolves, noting that the beasts easily dodge magic and are deadly in a fight. Hiraku listens and realizes they both got completely overpowered by his pets. Lu then formally introduces Hiraku as her husband, which leaves Tia completely flabbergasted. Tia formally introduces herself to Hiraku as an angel who serves God, though she admits her kind used to be worshipped warriors but are now mostly just muscle-headed fighters. Hiraku asks why an angel is hunting his new wife. Tia explains that Lu has a massive bounty on her head because she went on a rampage and blew up a noble's estate in the city. Lu defends herself, claiming that the noble was extremely annoying and constantly forced her to make strange medicines and drugs, so she just wanted to teach him a little lesson. Tia argues that blowing up a castle is not a little lesson and that Lu ruined the noble's honor. Lu admits she might have gone slightly too far but refuses to apologize. She then completely changes the subject and asks Tia if she wants to live on the farm with them. Tia is caught off guard by this sudden invitation. Lu insists that Tia will love it and drags her outside to show her around. Lu proudly shows off the vast vegetable fields and the growing orchard, leaving Tia amazed by the sheer scale of the farm. Then Lu takes Tia to a dark rocky cave to introduce her to Zabuton. The moment Tia sees the massive multi-eyed demon spider, she completely loses her mind and faints on the spot. Hiraku watches Tia collapse on the barren ground and figures that angels probably do not like giant spiders. After Tia wakes up, Lu tells her that it is time to harvest the crops and drags her into the fields. Tia complains about getting her hands dirty with farm work, but Hiraku hands her a massive, vibrant green cabbage. He tears off a fresh leaf, sprinkles some of the new salt they just extracted on it, and offers it to her. Tia takes a bite and is blown away by how delicious the fresh vegetable tastes. Hiraku smiles and tells her that food grown with your own hands always tastes better. They spend the entire afternoon harvesting massive amounts of cabbage, celery, and strawberries until the sun goes down. Tia wipes the sweat from her face and admits that the hard work is surprisingly fulfilling. They head back to the cabin, where Tia devours the fresh strawberries and declares that she definitely wants to stay. Lu excitedly begs Tia to live with them, admitting that she simply cannot handle all the physical farm work by herself. Tia finally understands that Lu just wanted to recruit her for free manual labor. Despite the trickery, Tia agrees to stay and proves to be a massive help. She uses her angelic magic to levitate heavy wooden logs and even summons a massive stone golem to carry timber across the forest, making the farm expansion much faster. As they gather more crops, Hiraku mentions that they are reaching their maximum harvesting capacity, meaning they cannot plant any more food without more hands to help. While taking a break, they notice the wolf pups running around. The wolves have grown fast, and their single white horns are already coming in. The wolf family has expanded so much that Hiraku admits he cannot even keep track of all their names anymore. He realizes the original dog hut is way too small for the growing pack, so he decides to build a massive new dog area next to the orchard. He constructs a long wooden building with individual stalls filled with hay, resembling a horse stable, to comfortably house all the wolves. Meanwhile, over at the cave, Zabuton's offspring are preparing to leave. Hiraku watches as hundreds of tiny blue spiderlings shoot white silk parachutes into the sky and catch the wind, flying off to start their own journeys across the world. A few of the spiderlings decide to stay behind and continue helping around the farm. With the farm running smoothly, Tia announces that she needs to leave for a few days to take care of some business. Hiraku worries that she might not come back, but Lu assures him that Tia will return. A few days later, Tia returns to the forest and brings a group of 7 high elf women with her. The elves are all dressed in matching green and white uniforms and introduce themselves as Leah, Leaf, Lekot, Lise, Lili, Lita, and Lise. They explain that their names are all similar because they are closely related. The elves reveal their tragic past, explaining that their home village in the north was completely wiped out after they got dragged into a brutal war between humans. Since then, their people were scattered, and these 7 have spent the last 200 years wandering through the harsh forests, looking for a safe place to settle down. They beg Hiraku to let them live on the farm so they can finally have a home and eventually repopulate their nearly extinct race. Hiraku is a bit overwhelmed by their intense plea but agrees to let them stay as long as they promise to get along with the current residents. He decides to introduce them to the rest of the farm family. First, he introduces them to Zabaton in the cave. The 7 elves take one look at the terrifying giant spider and instantly pass out from fear. After they wake up, Hiraku introduces them to the pack of horned inferno wolves. The elves immediately faint again. Hiraku sighs, realizing this is exactly how Tia reacted when she first arrived. With 7 new residents, the farm desperately needs more housing. Hiraku plans to build them a large house, but the elves quickly take over the project. Hiraku discovers that the High Elves possess incredible knowledge of construction, architecture, and lumber processing. Hiraku handles the heavy lifting by digging the foundation ditches, leveling the ground, and using his magical tools to chop down massive, steel-hard trees in single swings. The elves process the lumber and fit the logs together perfectly. In just 10 days, they finish constructing a massive 2-story wooden log cabin. The new house features a large communal living and dining room on the first floor, multiple storage rooms, and individual bedrooms on the second floor, all illuminated by glowing magical lights. Hiraku is incredibly proud of the new building and hopes the elves will feel safe and at peace there. As the elves settle into their new routine, they help with the daily vegetable harvest. Hiraku walks by the fields and is shocked to see the elves happily munching on raw garlic and onions straight from the dirt. He is even more surprised to learn that they use fire and eagerly eat meat. Hiraku admits that he always thought elves were mystical beings who slept in trees, hated fire, refused to use metal, and only ate nuts and berries. The elves laugh at his stereotypical ideas and explain that the wilderness is brutally unforgiving. If they tried living like that, they would have died immediately. They assure him they are hardcore survivalists who use every tool available to stay alive. To prove their skills and thank Hiraku for his hospitality, the elves offer to handle the farm's blacksmithing. They gather iron sand from the nearby river and build a large earthen furnace. They use charcoal to heat the furnace, melt the iron, and hammer the metal on an anvil. They successfully forge a sturdy metal frying pan, much to Hiraku's delight. He is thrilled that their farm's civilization is rapidly advancing and praises the elves for their versatility. The elves humbly mention that spending 2 centuries homeless teaches you how to do almost everything, except for settling down and having children. Hiraku decides to completely ignore the comment about reproduction and focuses on the work. Later, the elves go out to forage for medicinal herbs and notice the wheat fields. One of the elves asks if they can bake some bread using the flour Hiraku stored away. She reveals a ceramic jar filled with natural yeast she found in the wild, which will allow the dough to rise properly. They quickly mix the dough, shape it into long spirals on wooden sticks, and roast it over an open fire pit. The smell of baking bread fills the camp, and everyone gathers around to eat. Hiraku takes a bite of the spiral bread and is amazed by how delicious and fluffy it is. He decides right then and there that he needs to massively expand the wheat fields to keep a steady supply of bread. However, as the farm continues to grow into a bustling settlement, Hiraku suddenly gets nervous. He asks Lu if the forest land actually belongs to anyone, like a local king or the terrifying demon lord. He worries that someone might show up and punish them for building a massive farm without permission. Lu laughs and assures him that there is absolutely nothing to worry about. She explains that since Hiraku built the entire farm from scratch without any outside financial or political support, the land technically belongs solely to him by right of settlement. Hiraku feels a wave of relief wash over him and smiles, happy to know his home is truly his own. Inside the cabin, the girls snack on fresh tomatoes and cucumbers while gossiping about Hiraku. They all agree that he is incredibly strange. He somehow managed to effortlessly tame legendary inferno wolves and a mythical demon spider, and his farming skills produce impossibly large and delicious crops from basic soil. Yet, at the same time, he lacks basic common sense about the world, knowing nothing about angels, elves, or the local geography. They find his ignorance amusing, but are deeply grateful for the safe haven he created for them. Later that night, Hiraku sits alone at his table under the warm glow of the magical lights. He looks at his wooden mug and thinks about all the new people relying on him. He realizes that with so many new crops and residents, carrying buckets of water will no longer be efficient. He decides that first thing tomorrow, he will gather the elves and ask them to help him dig a permanent waterway to connect the river directly to their farm. Hiraku starts his day by heading out to his fields and discovers that Zabuton has captured a massive bee in her thick webs. The bee wears a tiny gold crown and looks completely terrified. Hiraku figures it might be dangerous but realizes it has given up fighting and just wants to be released. He decides to keep it and builds a large wooden hive near his newly planted orchard. Within 10 days, the bees build a massive nest inside the structure. Hiraku notes that the worker bees are normal-sized, but the queen is huge. He hopes to harvest honey eventually, though he knows he needs to plant a flower garden nearby first to give the bees nectar. Tia stops by the shed to talk to Hiraku but completely panics and runs away the moment she sees the giant swarm of bees. Leaving the insects to their work, Hiraku shifts his focus to the water reservoir he dug out earlier. He and Lu look over the deep trench, and Hiraku admits he still needs to build a proper waterway to connect it to the river since carrying buckets is too much work. Wood would leak too much over a long distance, and stone is hard to find in the forest. To solve this, Hiraku summons his magical farming tool in the form of a heavy mallet. He uses it to strike the leftover dirt from the reservoir excavation, magically compacting the loose soil into solid concrete-like U-shaped blocks. The elf girls step in to help with the mass production. They carry baskets of dirt while Hiraku hammers out block after block. Once they have enough pieces, the elves help lay the foundation through the forest, fitting the stone-like blocks together to form a long, sturdy channel. They build an intake gate at the top of a nearby waterfall to divert the river. Thanks to everyone's hard work, the water flows perfectly into the reservoir, giving the farm a steady supply of fresh water without needing to rely on the well. As the water fills the basin, several silver fish get swept in and jump onto the wooden platform. Hiraku catches them and realizes they are the vicious, sharp-toothed fish native to the deadly forest. Unbothered by their reputation, he quickly cleans and skewers them, deciding to roast them over an open campfire. Lu and Tia are extremely hesitant to eat monsters from the Forest of Death, fearing they might be toxic or dangerous, but Hiraku assures them it is safe and takes the first bite. Seeing him enjoy it, the girls cautiously try the fish and are instantly amazed by how delicious it is. The rest of the elves also try the roasted fish and love it just as much. The group catches a huge batch of the river fish, preserving the extra meat with salt so they can store it away for the coming winter. With the waterway complete, Hiraku tests out tilling the soil while thinking about rice. To his surprise, golden rice stalks immediately sprout in the dirt. He realizes he can grow rice in normal soil, but he decides to build a proper flooded rice paddy now that they have a steady water source. He digs out large rectangular plots and floods them with water from the new channel. He hands out bundles of green seedlings to the elf girls, and they all wade into the muddy water to plant the rows by hand. To protect the crop, Hiraku assigns Zabuton's tiny spiderlings to patrol the paddy and keep pests away. Thanks to the water and his magical tool, the rice grows incredibly fast. Once the field turns golden, Hiraku and the elves use sickles to instantly harvest the massive crop. They tie the stalks into bundles and hang them on wooden racks to dry under the sun. Hiraku then guides the girls through the tedious process of preparing the rice. He uses his tool to manifest an old-fashioned wooden thresher to separate the grains, then runs them through a sieve to remove the leftover plant matter. Next, they use a mortar and pestle to remove the husks and polish the rice. By the time they finish, the girls are completely exhausted and question if the food is even worth all this manual labor. Hiraku promises it is and prepares to cook the polished white rice. He sets up a large metal pot over a stone stove and asks Lu to light the fire. Lu gleefully prepares a massive, destructive magic attack, forcing Hiraku to quickly stop her and explain that he just needs a low, steady flame to cook the food properly. Once the fire is lit, the rice steams perfectly. Hiraku uses the preserved salted salmon from earlier as a filling and molds the steaming rice into large, heart-embellished rice balls. He hands them out to the group. Lu, Tia, and the elves take their first bites and are absolutely blown away by the incredible flavor. Seeing them enjoy the food fills Hiraku with a deep sense of happiness and pride as a farmer, and he decides to experiment with different fillings next time. After finishing the meal, Hiraku and one of the elves look at their mud-covered bodies from working in the paddy. The elf simply uses a quick magic spell to instantly clean the dirt off her clothes and skin. Hiraku is impressed but admits he really misses the feeling of soaking in a hot bath. He decides to build a fully functioning bathhouse right away. He sketches out a floor plan in the dirt, detailing a furnace, a large tub, and a changing room. The elves think the project is completely unnecessary since they can just wash in the river. But Hiraku points out that the river will be freezing during the winter. He insists that baths are great for health and circulation and refuses to drop the idea. The girls agree to help, and they quickly construct a stone chimney, a furnace made of compacted dirt, and a system of wooden troughs to bring water directly into a massive wooden tub. They even build small wooden stools for the washing area. However, Hiraku realizes a major flaw in his design. He worries about draining their dirty, soapy bathwater directly back into the river and polluting their water source. Tia offers a simple solution, suggesting they use slimes to clean the water. She explains that slimes eat waste and act as nature's perfect cleaners. Hiraku thinks slimes are dangerous monsters that kill novice adventurers, but Tia assures him they are basically harmless. She flies off and quickly catches a bunch of bouncy blue slimes from the starting village. Hiraku creates a purification pool connected to the drainage system and drops the slimes inside. Tia also suggests putting some slimes in the outhouse to clean the toilets. Hiraku is a bit unnerved at the thought of doing his business right over a slime, but he accepts the idea, completely solving their sanitation problem. While gathering firewood for the new bath furnace, Hiraku spots a wild mushroom on a log. He is too scared to eat it, fearing it might be poisonous. Lu confirms that identifying safe mushrooms is incredibly difficult, and the elves admit they either just cook them anyway or destroy them entirely to be safe. Wanting safe mushrooms for his meals, Hiraku uses his farming tool as a hammer and strikes the logs while visualizing safe varieties. He successfully cultivates known edible mushrooms like shiitake, shimeji, and maitake, planning to make a hot pot later. With the bathhouse finally heated and ready, Hiraku gathers the girls to explain how to use it. He tells them to undress in the changing room and wash themselves before getting into the tub, but the girls are confused and ask him to demonstrate. Flustered, Hiraku strips down to a towel and walks them through the process while they watch intently through the window. He finally sinks into the hot water, letting out a satisfied sigh as he remembers how he was forbidden from taking baths during his long hospitalization in his past life. Suddenly, the elf girls excitedly strip off their clothes and jump into the tub with him. Overwhelmed and deeply embarrassed by being surrounded by naked women, Hiraku awkwardly excuses himself and gets out early. The girls are confused as to why he will not just bathe with them to save hot water. Hiraku realizes he is too embarrassed to relax and regrets not building a separate men's bath, though the girls quickly complain that keeping a private bath just for himself is totally unfair. The next day, Kuro and the other wolves guide 5 new elf girls into the farm clearing. The new arrivals introduce themselves as Lafa, Lassa, Lalasha, Lalu, and Lami. They explain that they are relatives of the other elves and have spent the last 200 years wandering the dangerous forest looking for a safe place to settle. Hiraku warmly invites them to live on the farm with everyone else. The new elves immediately cheer in excitement and declare that they need to start building houses and making children right away to revive their nearly extinct race. Hiraku is bewildered by their bold reproductive plans but smiles and decides to support their enthusiasm as they get to work. As the farm continues to grow, Kuro the Black Wolf watches from the sidelines and reflects on his life. Before meeting Hiraku, Kuro lived completely alone in the forest and never lost a single fight to another male. He hunted whatever he wanted until he met his mate, Yuki. He lost a fight to her, and they began traveling together as a pair. Shortly after Yuki got pregnant, their luck ran out when they encountered the grappler bear, the undisputed king of the forest. The massive beast spared their lives, but they were left gravely injured and unable to hunt. Driven away by other predators, they wandered into the deepest part of the forest where even the grappler bear refuses to go. There they stumbled upon Hiraku. At first, Kuro thought Hiraku was just a weak, fragile human, wondering how he could survive alone in such a dangerous place. But then Kuro sensed the limitless, terrifying power radiating from Hiraku's magical farming tool. Believing their lives were over, Kuro and Yuki accepted their fate. Instead of attacking, Hiraku healed them, built them a home, and shared his food. When Hiraku fed them the meat of a massive great boar, Kuro was deeply impressed by his hunting skills. Recognizing Hiraku's strength and kindness, Kuro and Yuki swore loyalty to him and made him their master. Since then, their pups have grown and their pack has expanded. Kuro watches Hiraku effortlessly manage the growing settlement and the large group of powerful women who follow him. Kuro realizes his master is far greater than he initially thought. Kuro's only lingering concern is that Hiraku still has absolutely no idea that Kuro and his family are legendary, terrifying monsters known as Inferno Wolves. Despite this misunderstanding, Kuro feels incredibly fortunate that his journey led him to this peaceful life by Hiraku's side. Later that day, the massive 2-story log mansion is finally completed. Hiraku and the 3 elf girls stand in the sandy clearing and admire their newly built home. Leah points out that it would not feel right if Hiraku did not have the nicest house in the village, so they made sure to address everyone's requests during construction. They decide to take a tour of the interior and step inside. They first check out the spacious main hall, which they designed specifically so everyone can gather and hang out together. Next, they look at Hiraku's personal room on the first floor. Across the main hall, they find the dining room, which features a long wooden table lined with round stools, a bookshelf, and a large stone fireplace. They move on to the kitchen in the back, where Hiraku notes that they even set up extra stone stoves outside for larger meals. After that, they head down the wooden staircase into the dim, stone-walled cellar. Hiraku remarks that this basement area will be perfect for storing food and firewood during the colder months. Moving up to the second floor, the girls check out their new individual rooms. They are absolutely thrilled to finally have their own private spaces, as the previous living arrangements were getting far too crowded with all the new arrivals. While walking down the hallway, Hiraku notices one specific room that has a heavy bolt lock on the sturdy door. He wonders why a lock like that is necessary, but ultimately decides to pretend he never saw it to avoid any trouble. They also check out the bathroom, which features a large, functional wooden bathtub situated on a stone floor next to a set of wooden shelves. Hiraku looks out the window at the massive tree outside and feels like it is watching over them. He thanks the elves for their hard work. Leah tells him that if he finds any part of the house unsatisfactory during the winter, he just needs to let them know so they can fix it. Hiraku then prepares a hot bath and enjoys a relaxing soak. Afterward, he decides to decorate the entrance of the mansion. He carves large stone statues of the horned wolves and places them on pedestals right outside the double doors. He feels very satisfied with how everything is shaping up. By the time he finishes working, Hiraku is completely starving. He heads inside and tells Lou and Tia that he wants to try making a brand new dish called curry. The girls have never heard of it and wonder if it is difficult to make. Hiraku explains that while it can be easy, making it completely from scratch takes a lot of effort. He takes them out to the crop fields to show them the ingredients he has been growing, noting that he has fields full of unfamiliar plants. Thanks to his almighty farming tool, he managed to cultivate crops that normally cannot survive in cold climates. He first harvests some cumin, explaining that it is the main spice responsible for the curry's aroma. Next, he digs up some turmeric. He tells the girls that the massive underground root is dried out, broken apart into smaller segments, and used to give the curry its signature vibrant yellow color. He also harvests coriander, which gives off a fresh, fruity scent. He jokingly offers a leafy sprig of the coriander to Kuro and Yuki. The 2 massive wolves take a sniff and immediately drop to the ground, rolling around in pure bliss. Lou and Tia are absolutely shocked to discover a simple plant capable of repelling powerful inferno wolves and decide they need to research it later. Hiraku then gathers black pepper and cayenne peppers to finish his spice collection. As he sets up his cooking station outside, he wonders if girls actually find guys who make curry from scratch annoying, but he decides to proceed anyway. Since Lou and Tia are busy researching magical talismans, Hiraku enlists Leah to be his sole kitchen helper. They begin by heating up some extracted rapeseed oil in a large metal pan. They toss in some rabbit meat to sear it. Hiraku instructs Leah to take the meat off the heat once it gets some color so it does not overcook. He then cooks the cumin seeds in the leftover meat juices to extract the maximum flavor and aroma. Next, they sauté finely diced onions, ginger and garlic, taking care not to burn the mixture. Once it turns into a thick paste, Hiraku adds diced tomatoes, salt, and all the freshly ground spice powders. Finally, he adds the meat, some boiled soybeans and water, covering the pot to let the stew simmer. While waiting, Hiraku suddenly realizes he forgot to make naan bread to accompany the curry. He quickly counts how many portions he needs for all the elves and girls, and realizes it is a massive amount. He quickly kneads the white dough, rolls it out flat with a wooden rolling pin, and sticks the pieces onto the hot rounded base of an overturned metal pot to bake them while steam rises into the air. The delicious smell of the cooking food quickly attracts the rest of the elves and the wolves. As the sun begins to set, the entire group gathers around the outdoor picnic tables. Hiraku serves the steaming bowls of meat curry alongside the toasted flatbreads. The girls stare at the strange colored stew with a bit of hesitation. Hiraku assures them it is safe and shows them how to use the nan to scoop up the curry. He takes the first bite and is highly satisfied with the authentic, spicy flavor. Encouraged, Lu and Tia take a bite and are instantly blown away by the taste. They find the tingly spiciness completely addicting. The rest of the elves dig in, closing their eyes in pure culinary bliss. They tell Hiraku that every bite just makes them want to eat more. Seeing how fast the food is disappearing, Hiraku nervously asks them to leave a little bit for him. He also serves a bowl to the wolves, who voraciously consume the spicy stew in seconds, kicking up a cloud of dust in their excitement. Within minutes, Hiraku is completely sold out of food. He scrapes the last bit of curry from the pan for himself and smiles, realizing the meal was a massive success. The girls complain that they are totally stuffed but definitely want to eat it again. Hiraku memorizes the recipe and plans to experiment with different spice ratios next time. Soon after, the temperature drops and winter draws near. Knowing the heavy snow will trap them indoors, Hiraku focuses on finalizing their winter preparations. He chops a massive amount of firewood and stacks it neatly in the cellar. He then packs a wooden cart with freshly harvested potatoes and thick white blankets, pulling it down the dusty path to visit Zabuton. The giant spider, carrying tiny spiderlings on her back, is preparing to go into hibernation at the top of the massive tree, so Hiraku sends the supplies up to her to ensure she stays warm and fed. Zabuton is incredibly thankful for the extra bedding. Meanwhile, Leah and the other elves decide to spend the winter working on their new forge and various other construction projects. To ensure the wolves have enough food since they cannot hunt in the deep snow, Hiraku asks Lu and Tia to preserve a massive stockpile of meat. The two girls use their fire magic to quickly smoke and dry thick slabs of meat on metal skewers. During the process, the wolves playfully jump up and steal some of the steaks right out of the girls' hands, proving the meat is already a hit. Next, Hiraku builds a large wooden storage structure for the vegetables. He explains that they will place the vegetables in the top compartments and cover the entire unit with a magical sheet and snow. The empty bottom boxes will catch any melting water, keeping the vegetables dry and perfectly preserved. Hiraku eagerly waits for the snow to fall so he can test out the snow storage method, feeling very proud of his invention. Watching Lu and Tia use magic so effortlessly every day makes Hiraku want to try it out himself. He tries to cast a basic ignition spell to create a small flame on his finger, but nothing happens. Lu explains that even low-level spells require intense studying. Hiraku then tries to cast a wind spell and even attempts to sculpt a pile of dirt into a massive stone golem like Tia does. Naturally, he completely fails at everything. He feels a bit disappointed, noting that all he really does is farm and cook, while the others possess incredible magical abilities to summon golems and control elements. Lu immediately stops him and tells him he is actually the most amazing person in the village. She points out that surviving alone in the deadly forest and building this entire settlement is something no one else could ever accomplish. Her words deeply comfort him. Eventually, the heavy snow begins to fall, blanketing the entire forest and the farm. The group retreats inside the cozy log cabin to spend the winter indoors. Realizing they will need things to do for fun, Hiraku uses his carving tools and small wooden discs to create several classic board games. He starts by making a reversi set. He teaches the girls the rules, explaining that they just need to surround their opponent's pieces to flip them to their own color. Lu thinks the game sounds incredibly simple and boring, but Tia argues that the simple design allows for highly complicated strategies. Lu immediately challenges Tia to a match to settle their rivalry. However, as the game progresses, Tia realizes she is losing. In a panic, she uses her magic to levitate the game pieces, surrounded by a cyan glow, and completely scramble the board, casually claiming her hand slipped. Lu is furious, and the two agree to a best-of-3 rematch. Later, Hiraku checks on the wolves and is absolutely terrified to find Kuro and Yuki sitting at the table, playing a perfect game of chess. He realizes they fully understand the complex rules and decides never to challenge them. Instead, he sets up a game of mahjong with Tia Lei and Kuro, hoping to easily win and avenge Lu's earlier frustration. He assumes Kuro will not understand the complicated tile game. However, Kuro quickly declares a winning hand. The girls also declare wins, completely overwhelming Hiraku. Kuro reveals a Yakuman, an incredibly rare and powerful hand, instantly depleting all of Hiraku's points. Defeated, Hiraku admits Kuro is the absolute best player. Wanting a break from board games, Hiraku carves a mini bowling set. To make it more interesting, he paints the wooden pins with comical faces of criminals, labeling them as arsonists clutching flaming torches, scam artists in suits, and serial killers brandishing knives. Lu asks why they need to knock them down, and Hiraku simply states they have to take out the bad guys. He rolls a wooden bun down the red carpet runner and scores a strike, sending the villainous pins flying. The girls cheer enthusiastically and take turns playing. The group spends the rest of the cold winter happily playing games and eating warm hot pot meals together. Finally, the snow melts and spring arrives. The forest turns green again, and the morning air feels warm. Hiraku steps out into the courtyard, eager to finish planting the new crops. He greets Lu and Tia, and they realize it is time for Zabuton to wake up from her hibernation. Suddenly, a strange sound echoes from above. They look up into the clear blue sky and spot a massive winged creature flying rapidly toward the farm. Hiraku panics, thinking it is a dragon, but Tia corrects him, identifying the red beast as a wyvern. The creature opens its jaws to attack, but before it can do anything, a massive beam of cyan magic surges upward from the ground. The powerful beam strikes the wyvern head-on, completely vaporizing the red monster into energy particles in a brilliant flash of light. After vaporizing the wyvern, Hiraku checks the surrounding area to ensure everyone is safe and evaluates the damage. He confirms that while the crop fields took a bit of a beating, all the buildings are completely fine. He regroups with Lu and Tia to discuss the massive beast. Hiraku wonders if someone deliberately sent the wyvern to attack them, but the girls assure him that encountering such a massive creature is incredibly rare. They explain that no one would send such a valuable and powerful beast out on its own, so it was most likely just a wild monster acting independently. Relieved that it was just an isolated incident, Hiraku immediately wonders if the wyvern meat is edible. That evening, he prepares a massive feast inside the log cabin to find out. He grills thick wyvern round steaks with a variety of spices, wraps the breast meat in large leaves to steam it, and simmers the tail meat into a rich, hearty vegetable stew. Lu takes a bite of the steak and is absolutely amazed by how tender the meat is, especially since a regular knife could not even pierce the creature's tough skin earlier. Tia agrees and happily savors the delicious meal. As they eat, the girls look over at Kuro and the wolves resting nearby and realize how incredibly lucky they are. They discuss how surviving in this dangerous forest is a massive blessing and thank fate for bringing them to Hiraku and the wolves. Hiraku just smiles and asks if he forgot to remove the bones, completely missing the sentimental moment. Meanwhile, news of the wyvern's sudden defeat quickly reaches the distant demonic kingdom of Galgardo. Inside the Grand Hall of the Demon Lord's castle, the four great generals are completely terrified by the report. Gratz refuses to believe the news while Beezels sits in distress. Randan frantically points out that a wyvern approaching usually requires them to mobilize their entire military force, and he cannot comprehend how someone killed it in just 2 hits from the ground. Stressed about the kingdom's budget and the sheer power of this unknown threat, Randan slams his hands on the table and declares that he wants to resign before panic spreads among the citizens. Far away at the gatekeeper dragon's lair, the colossal blue dragon Drime and his associate Gucci discuss the massive magical blast they witnessed. Gucci notes that the attack would have likely pierced cleanly through Drime. The giant dragon agrees and decides it would be incredibly foolish to ever attack the forest, choosing to stay far away from the area. Back at the village, Hiraku decides it is finally time to start making alcohol from the grapes they grew. He plans to make wine and gathers all the elf girls to help with the process. They quickly harvest all the ripe, dark grapes from the vineyard and bring them to a large wooden vat. Hiraku explains that they need to squash the grapes to let the natural yeast ferment the juice. Lalasha, one of the high elves, uses her skills to craft several watertight wooden barrels to store the liquid. Hiraku tells the girls to step into the massive vat and start stomping the grapes with their bare feet. Lu and the elves are initially very hesitant to step on something they plan to drink, but they jump in anyway. The grapes are sticky, and the girls struggle to keep a steady rhythm as they march in circles. To help everyone stay in sync, one of the elves suggests singing an old working song from their home village. They start singing and stepping to the beat, making the process much smoother. Zabuton the giant spider even helps out by dropping down from a branch with her spiderlings and using wooden sticks to ring a bell, providing a perfect rhythm for the girls. They manage to process enough grapes to fill 16 entire wooden barrels. Sylvia, Kizuna, Himikawa, and Eurytia help finish up the work and sit down to rest as the sun sets. Sylvia is incredibly excited to drink the wine, but she worries that they might not have made enough for everyone. While the village works peacefully, a massive argument breaks out in the divine realm. The god who reincarnated Hiraku gets violently scolded by the goddess of agriculture. She is absolutely furious that he accidentally punished an innocent human soul and then tried to cover it up by sending Hiraku to the deadly forest of death. She is even more enraged that the makeshift farming tool he gave Hiraku is actually a replica of the legendary Holy Lanscream. She yells that the weapon should have instantly drained all of Hiraku's life force and killed him. The god defends himself, explaining that he gave Hiraku a super healthy body with fast recovery abilities, which is why he can wield the weapon without dying. The goddess refuses to listen to his excuses and complains that the statue honoring her in the mortal world looks like an old man. As punishment for his carelessness, she uses her magic to freeze the god, forcing him to sit as a statue for 300 years. Back in the forest, Hiraku finds a white-haired elf girl tied up in Zabuton's thick spider webs. He immediately feels a sense of déjà vu. Lou rushes over and recognizes the girl as her sister, Flora. Flora explains that she heard Lou was being chased by a dangerous angel, so she followed her all the way to the forest to help. Tia laughs mischievously at being called dangerous, which completely shocks Flora. Flora acts very haughty at first and demands to know who Hiraku is, doubting that he is Lou's husband. However, Lou quickly informs her that Hiraku is the master of the legendary Inferno Wolves and the man who effortlessly killed a wyvern. Realizing she is in the presence of someone incredibly powerful, Flora immediately drops to the ground in a full prostration and begs Hiraku for forgiveness. Hiraku tells her not to worry about it and invites her to stay for dinner. He serves a meal featuring a bowl of soup filled with soft white cubes. Flora asks what it is, and Hiraku explains that he finally managed to make tofu from soybeans. He also mentions that he misses the taste of miso and soy sauce, which are made by fermenting the beans. Flora is confused by the concept of fermentation, so Hiraku explains that tiny, invisible microorganisms cause changes in the food. Since the people of this world rely entirely on magic and do not understand microorganisms, Flora instantly treats this information as a massive scientific breakthrough. Her eyes light up with intense curiosity, and she declares that she has found a fascinating new subject for her research. She promises to bring miso and soy sauce to the world and immediately leaves the village in a huge rush to pack her belongings so she can move in permanently. 1 month later, Flora returns to the settlement. This time, she brings along a large group of ogre maids led by a woman named Anne. She also brings a few cows so the village can finally have a steady supply of milk, butter, and cheese. Shortly after Flora's arrival, Tia asks to leave for a few days. When she returns, she brings her own subordinates to join the settlement. She enthusiastically introduces 3 heavily armored angel guards named Gran Maria, Kudel, and Corone. She also brings a group of muscular green lizardmen led by a man named Daga. Daga steps forward and presents a small wooden cage containing a live chicken. Tia gets extremely excited and brags about the bird, confirming that it lays eggs. Hiraku is thrilled by the new additions, noting that the village is becoming much more civilized. The ogre maids quickly take over the cleaning duties, sweeping the log cabin with magical efficiency. Hiraku also teaches them his advanced cooking techniques, showing them how to fry, braise, and steam food with proper heat control. The maids take a strong interest in cooking and quickly prepare a fancy dinner of killer rabbit meat served with fresh vegetables. Meanwhile, Tia organizes the village defenses. She assigns the 3 angel guards to patrol different regions of the sky above the forest, ensuring they spot any incoming threats. Daga and the lizardmen take charge of all the heavy outdoor labor. They easily carry massive logs and speed up the construction of new buildings. Since all the lizardmen look identical to him, Hiraku asks Daga to tie a red scarf around his arm so he can easily identify the leader. Hiraku looks at the growing population and starts to feel a bit overwhelmed by how many people are living on the farm. Just as he thinks about this, one of the elves suddenly arrives with a massive group of female elves who survived in the forest. Hiraku is shocked by the sheer number of new arrivals and asks if any men survived with them. The elf confirms that there are no men left in their group, but she cheerfully suggests that they can just start making babies with Hiraku to rebuild their population. Hiraku gets extremely flustered by the idea and decides not to ask any more questions about their plans. A few days later, Hiraku decides the settlement has grown far too large to just be a simple farm. He calls a massive meeting inside the main hall, gathering all the representatives. Lu, Tia, Anne, Daga, the elf leaders, Kuro, and Zabuton all stand on the red carpet to listen to him. Hiraku explains that since they have so many buildings and residents, they need to come up with an official name for their village. The girls immediately suggest naming it after him, proposing names like Hiraku Village or Machio Town. Hiraku rejects the idea because he hates the sound of it. He suggests naming the settlement after the forest they live in instead. However, the others quickly inform him that the area is actually known as the Forest of Death. Hiraku pictures a spooky ghost town and decides that the Village of Death sounds absolutely terrible. He scraps the idea and walks over to the large wooden sliding doors. He pulls them open, revealing the majestic, towering tree that stands in the center of their settlement. He turns back to the group and announces that they will officially call their home the Great Tree Village. Everyone is amazed by the view and fully supports the new name. To celebrate the founding of the Great Tree Village, Hiraku organizes a massive bonfire party that night. The entire village gathers outside under the stars. Hiraku reveals the very first batch of wine they made from the grapes and tells everyone to enjoy themselves. The elves, lizardmen and maids all cheer and start feasting. During the celebration, the elves start calling Hiraku the mayor. He gets embarrassed and tries to tell them that they need to officially decide on a leader later, but the girls insist that he is the only one fit for the job. The party gets incredibly lively as the night goes on. The maids serve food and drinks, and the elves dance happily around the fire. The wine turns out to be incredibly potent, and soon, almost all the animals are completely passed out on the ground from drinking too much. Even some of the girls end up slumping over the wooden tables in a drunken stupor. Hiraku sits quietly at a picnic table with Tia, watching the warm glow of the bonfire illuminate the massive tree. Tia tells him that she noticed him zoning out and asks what he is thinking about. Hiraku smiles and admits he is just so happy that all of this feels like a dream. Tia blushes and gently tells him that this is not a dream. She promises that they are all going to keep living together and enjoying their lives. Hiraku agrees, and the two clink their wooden mugs together, toasting to the future of the Great Tree Village. Suddenly Lu runs over, completely drunk and pouting. She complains that it is not fair for them to toast without her, and demands that the maids pour her another mug of wine. Hiraku and Tia laugh at her antics as the entire village continues to celebrate their new home long into the night. As the seasons change from winter to summer, the population of the newly named Great Tree Village continues to grow. One day, a formal messenger from the demonic kingdom arrives at the settlement. The man introduces himself as Beazle and requests an audience with the person in charge. Hiraku steps forward and introduces himself as the mayor. Beazle presents a glowing green potion as a gift to commemorate their meeting. He then states that the Demon Lord wants to discuss the status of the settlement. Hiraku immediately starts worrying that the Demon Lord might demand heavy taxes or evict them from the land. He decides to take a bold stance to protect his home and consults with Lu and Tia. He proposes offering 10% of their harvest as a tax payment to demonstrate that they have no intention of rebelling against the Demon Lord. However, he firmly states that this tax will only apply to crops grown in the fields. Hiraku insists that they will not hand over any milk, eggs, honey, or alcohol they produce. He tells Beazle that if the Demon Lord wants those items, they will have to negotiate a separate trade agreement. Beazle is completely intimidated by the powerful warriors surrounding Hiraku and immediately agrees to the terms. He hands Hiraku a formal contract and Hiraku signs it. Beazle leaves the village, taking a box of apples as a parting gift from Hiraku. After the messenger departs, Hiraku feels a bit nervous that he might have been too aggressive during the negotiations. Lu and Tia quickly assure him that he did a fantastic job. They explain that standard tax rates are usually around 50 to 60%, so securing a 10% rate is an absolute steal. They point out that making the demons travel to collect taxes forces them to officially recognize the village. They also inspect the gift Beazle brought and realize it is a legendary almighty medicine capable of curing any injury. Meanwhile, back at the Demon Lord's castle, the four great generals hold an emergency meeting. Gratz, Randon, and Aris are completely terrified by Beazle's report. Beazle explains that he had absolutely no choice but to accept Hiraku's low tax offer. He reveals that, if he had refused, the village would have instantly become an enemy force. Beazle lists the terrifying residents of the village, noting that the Vampire Princess and the Angel of Annihilation live there. He also mentions an entire army of high elves and a pack of deadly inferno wolves. Beazle confesses that he thought his life was over when the killer angels guided him to the mayor. The generals realize that this monstrous village easily possesses the power to obliterate a wyvern. Beazle tries to calm them down by showing off the apples Hiraku gave him. Randon takes a bite and is amazed by the taste. However, Beazle suddenly realizes that the white cloth wrapping the apples is actually silk woven by a legendary great demon spider. This terrifying revelation breaks Randon's spirit completely. He immediately stands up and shouts that he is resigning from his position. Back at the village, a colossal blue dragon suddenly descends from the sky. The massive beast introduces itself as Drime, the ruler of the dragons. Drime is accompanied by his associate Gucci. Gucci presents an expensive magical sword to Hiraku as a neighborly gift. Drime explains that his lair is located nearby and he just wanted to formally greet his new neighbors. Hiraku accepts the sword but notes that Drime is far too massive to fit inside any of the village buildings. Gucci quickly asks Drime to shrink down. The dragon uses his magic to transform into a human man with long dark hair and a mustache. Drime enters the village and joins Hiraku for a massive feast inside the main log cabin. He takes a drink of the village's homemade wine and absolutely loves it. Drime gets completely drunk and loudly declares that he is never leaving the village. He promises to stay and intercept any attackers. Gucci calmly tells Drime that he cannot abandon his own territory and forces the drunken dragon to leave. Drime transforms back into his massive dragon form and flies off into the night sky. The next day, Hiraku realizes that handling diplomatic relations is getting very complicated. He decides they need a proper place to host guests so they do not have to invite strangers into their personal homes. He talks to the elves and suggests building a guest house that can fit 4 people. The elves immediately reject the idea. They explain that visitors traveling through the dangerous forest will always arrive in large groups. They decide to build a massive guest house capable of holding 30 people. The elves quickly get to work and construct a large wooden building with a banquet hall on the first floor and bedrooms on the second. Next, Hiraku decides to completely overhaul the village's welcoming system. Previously, the angel guards would aggressively capture anyone who approached the forest. Alternatively, the giant spider Zabaton would ring a warning bell, causing the entire village to grab their weapons and prepare for battle. Hiraku feels this is way too hostile for friendly visitors. He suggests forming a small welcoming party consisting only of himself, Lou, and Tia. The lizardmen immediately object, warning that enemies might try to sneak in disguised as visitors. Hiraku compromises and creates a dedicated welcoming party consisting of elves, maids, and lizardmen. Flora also volunteers to stay up all night, keeping watch over the guests, as vampires do not need much sleep. Soon after, the new reception system is put to the test when a group of beastmen from Howling Village arrives. Their leader, a purple-haired beastman named Gulf, introduces himself and asks to establish relations. Tia quickly notices that Gulf left several of his troops hiding in the woods outside the village. She coldly warns him that anyone hiding outside will be treated as an enemy. A terrified Gulf immediately calls his hidden comrades out of the trees. Hiraku welcomes the beastmen and guides them to the newly built guest house. The beastmen are absolutely amazed by the beautiful maids and the delicious food. Hiraku treats them to a warm meal but specifically restricts their wine intake to just 2 cups per person to ensure they stay sharp for the upcoming negotiations. The maids feel bad offering such a meager meal, but Lou insists they need to find out what the visitors want. During the meal, Gulf explains that Howling Village is a mining and hunting settlement located in the eastern mountains. He laughs and mentions that the village elders claim the settlement is 1,000 years old, but it is actually only 500 years old. He reveals that they recently lost their human trading partners due to a conflict and need a new alliance to survive. They heard about Great Tree Village from the Demon Lord's people and decided to make the dangerous journey. Gulf proposes a simple barter system since neither village uses currency. He explains that carrying goods across the mountains is incredibly difficult, so he wants Hiraku's people to travel to Howling Village to trade. Hiraku considers using the Inferno Wolves to pull supply carts and agrees to the arrangement. Gulf offers to trade their mined ores, paints, glassworks, and metal tools in exchange for Hiraku's food crops. Hiraku is absolutely thrilled at the prospect of getting glass and metalware. He instantly agrees to the trade. Gulf feels a bit embarrassed because he did not bring an extravagant gift like the dragon's sword, but Hiraku warmly reassures him that the thought is what counts. A few days later, it is time to execute the trade. Hiraku wants to travel to Howling Village himself, but Tia insists that the village leader shouldn't travel for the first trade mission. They hold a lottery, and Tia wins the right to act as the village representative. To make the journey faster, Drime agrees to fly Tia and the lizardmen to Howling Village in exchange for a barrel of wine. Drime has started visiting the village regularly just to drink and hand over random treasures, so he happily accepts the job. Tia loads the crops onto the dragon and flies off. A few days pass before Tia returns with the lizardmen. She reports that the trade was a massive success. The beastmen were initially hesitant to try the unknown foods, but Tia used free food samples to win them over. A massive crowd quickly gathered and traded away all their goods. Tia even accidentally sold the wine that was meant for Drime. She also brings news that 20 young women from Howling Village want to permanently move to Great Tree Village. Hiraku is happy to take them in, but he notices the extreme gender imbalance in his settlement. He points out that the village desperately needs more men to secure its future. He agrees to accept the women on the condition that Howling Village sends at least a few men alongside them. A few days later, the new Beastmen residents arrive at the village. Their leader, an orange-haired beastkin named Senna, bows submissively and begs Hiraku not to abandon them. She promises that they are mentally prepared to do whatever work he requires. Hiraku warmly welcomes them and tells them to take their time adjusting to their new homes without worrying about getting kicked out. Senna happily announces that they fulfilled his condition and brought 3 males with them. However, Hiraku looks over and sees that the 3 males are just little children. The elves immediately start calculating if they have to wait 5 or 10 years for the boys to grow up. Hiraku awkwardly watches the women deliberate and just hopes the village's future is secure. As the new beastmen from Howling Village begin settling into their new homes, Lemulius, the housing manager, checks in to ensure they have everything they need. The beastmen initially thought they would be treated horribly as refugees, but they quickly realize the village is very welcoming. However, they struggle to adapt to the terrifying wildlife and constantly faint from fear whenever they run into Zabuton, the giant spider, or Kuro's pack of wolves. Later, while the beastmen children are playing in the fields, Senna uses her magic to safely catch them before they get hurt. Hiraku watches this happen and is completely shocked to discover that she can use magic. He asks around the village and quickly learns that literally everyone else possesses magical abilities. The angels cast spells effortlessly, the high elves levitate heavy baskets with water and fire magic, and the lizardmen use magic beams to water the crops. Hiraku even sees the wolves extinguishing magical flames with water, the giant spiders spinning magic rings, the bees floating with fire, and the slime splitting themselves into smaller pieces using magical energy. He realizes that he is the only person in the entire settlement who cannot use magic. Senna tries to console him by saying she is not very good at it, but Hiraku accepts his lack of magical talent and decides to just focus on his farming duties instead. Suddenly, a massive earthquake interrupts him. Tia flies down and warns Hiraku that a massive grappler bear and a bloody viper are fighting in the northern forest, and their battle is causing the tremors. Hiraku immediately wonders if the monsters taste good. Tia grabs him and they fly over the forest to investigate. They find the massive bear and the giant horned serpent locked in a fierce battle. Hiraku tells Tia to drop him down quickly. He lands and instantly kills both of the giant monsters with a single attack. The angels and lizardmen are completely stunned by his overwhelming strength as they haul the massive carcasses back to the village on wooden sleds. Hiraku decides to cook the monsters right away. He chops the bear meat into chunks, throws it into a large pot, and adds vegetables and red wine to braise it. The maids panic and yell at him for wasting their precious wine on cooking, but he ignores them and continues simmering the stew. He tastes the finished wine-braised bear and admits it is incredibly gamey. Next, he takes the bloody viper meat and deep fries it. The angels eat the fried snake and absolutely love it, noting that it tastes exactly like fried chicken breast. Hiraku agrees but feels the dish is missing mayonnaise. He visits Flora in her laboratory and asks her for an antibacterial medicine that targets microorganisms so he can prevent stomach aches from eating raw food. Flora initially offers him a highly explosive pink potion, but Hiraku insists on a safe one, which she eventually provides. He then asks about her miso production. Flora admits her miso completely failed and she had to rebuild her hut 3 times because she keeps using explosive magic instead of letting the beans ferment naturally. Hiraku decides to guide her through the process. First, he gathers fresh eggs from the chickens. He goes to the kitchen, mixes the egg yolks with salt, apple vinegar and oil, and whisks it all together until it turns into creamy mayonnaise. Flora tastes the mayonnaise with the fried snake and loves it so much she wants to eat it straight from the bowl. But Hiraku scolds her and tells her it is unhealthy. Next, they start making the miso. They simmer the soybeans and grind them into a paste. Hiraku uses his almighty farming tool to create the koi mold, chanting the word mold repeatedly. Flora writes his chant down, thinking it is a magical incantation, but he tells her to stop. They mix the mold with salt, form it into balls, and pack it tightly into wooden barrels to age in the cellar. Hiraku explains it will take several months for the flavors to develop, and Flora compares the required patience to her magical research. Soon after, a group of elder dwarves led by a man named Donovan arrives at the village. Donovan explains they traveled a long way because they heard the village produces high-quality alcohol. Hiraku is happy to share, but the girls quickly object, insisting their wine is far too valuable to give away to strangers. Donovan admits they do not have any money to pay, but he offers their advanced brewing technology in exchange. He notices the high-quality corn and wheat in the fields and promises to help them turn the crops into fine alcohol. Hiraku agrees to the deal. Donovan and the dwarves immediately start processing the crops, mashing them in large pots and using a copper distillation apparatus. They present Hiraku with a glass of clear corn whiskey. Hiraku takes a sip and instantly blushes from the extreme potency, realizing he is a lightweight when it comes to strong liquor. The dwarves officially decide to stay and work as the village brewers. That night, Hiraku hosts a massive welcome party for the new beastmen and the dwarves. Everyone drinks heavily and celebrates together. The beastmen girls gulp down the alcohol, and Donovan enjoys the mayonnaise with his vegetables. One of the demons gets completely drunk and has to be tied up by the angels. Donovan thanks Hiraku for taking them in. Hiraku uses the opportunity to ask Donovan if he is interested in any of the women in the village, hoping to finally solve the severe gender imbalance issue. Donovan seriously considers the offer, but states the girls are all way too young for him. He adds that he is only attracted to women who can grow a thick beard. Hiraku sighs in defeat, realizing the cultural barrier between humans and dwarves is just too high to overcome. The next day, Hiraku is working in the forest when a massive explosion shakes the ground. He looks up and sees a giant black dragon and a white dragon flying overhead. Assuming they are hostile wyverns coming to attack the village, he prepares to defend his home. He swings his glowing tool and unleashes a massive blast of magic that narrowly misses the white dragon. Suddenly, a man named Gucci frantically runs over and begs Hiraku to stop attacking. Gucci introduces the dragons as Grafaloon, Drime's wife, and Lastismoon, Drime's daughter. Gucci explains that Drime had been sneaking out of his castle every single night and stealing treasures from his own vault to bring to the village. Grafaloon noticed this suspicious behavior and assumed Drime was having an affair, so she came to burn the village down in retaliation. After seeing the village and talking to everyone, Grafaloon quickly realizes Drime is far too cowardly to ever have an affair. Grafaloon bows and apologizes to Hiraku for plotting to destroy the village, and Hiraku apologizes for nearly killing them with his magic attack. Drime gets scolded by his family for causing the massive misunderstanding with his drinking habits. After Hiraku leaves, Grafaloon talks privately with Gucci. She realizes the village possesses terrifying military strength, noting that Hiraku's attack would have instantly killed her if Zabuton the giant spider hadn't pulled her out of the way. She decides they must keep a close eye on the village. Grafaloon orders her daughter Lasti to live in the village to ensure their overwhelming power is never turned against the dragon tribe. Lasti agrees and cheerfully introduces herself to Hiraku as a new resident. Hiraku puts her to work harvesting crops, but Lasti proves to be too strong and clumsy. She accidentally crushes the tomatoes, shatters the plates in the tavern with her tail, and blows up the apples with her magic. Hiraku decides normal chores do not suit her at all. Furthermore, the village animals, including the wolves, cows, and chickens, are absolutely terrified of her dragon aura, which completely halts the production of milk and eggs. Hiraku figures out a new job for Lasti and officially appoints her as the village diplomat. A merchant named Michael arrives at the village to buy goods. Lasti aggressively negotiates with him. She accidentally terrifies the merchant by transforming into her massive green dragon form just to show him how ripe the strawberries are. The merchant is so completely paralyzed by fear that he instantly agrees to buy 10 boxes of strawberries, along with apples, pears, persimmons, and watermelons. Lasti successfully secures the massive sale and happily bids the terrified merchant farewell. Hiraku concludes she is perfectly suited for the diplomatic job. Meanwhile, at the Demon Lord's castle, the Demon Lord holds an emergency meeting with his generals, Beezle and Randan. They are horrified to learn that the village now has dragons, making their military might even more overwhelming. They decide they desperately need a spy and send Beezle's daughter, Florim. Florim confidently accepts the mission, boasting about her magical abilities to her father. She flies to the village enveloped in a blue aura. Lasti greets her at the gate. Florem is instantly shocked that a legendary dragon like Lasti is working as a humble diplomat bragging about grapes. Florem decides to investigate the village on her own. She sneaks around the forest and spots the lizardmen, beastmen, ogres, and dwarves working together. She then sees the vampire princess Lu, the angel of annihilation Tia, the trio of killer angels, and the man-eating high elves. She even spots the pack of inferno wolves and demon spiders working together in harmony. Realizing the village has a world-ending military force capable of destroying the demon kingdom, Florem loses all her confidence and wonders what kind of godlike being commands them all. While walking through the woods, she bumps into Hiraku carrying a hammer. Assuming he is just a weak human, she rudely tells him to leave her alone and storms off. She then returns to Lasti and asks about the human she just saw. Lasti casually reveals that Hiraku is the mayor of the village and the man who defeated her mother. Florem realizes she just insulted the most powerful being in the world and has a complete panic attack. She ends up officially moving into the village to help with the cabbage harvest. Hiraku notices she gets along very well with Lasti, but is completely confused as to why Florem acts so terrified and submissive whenever he is around. As the village continues to grow, Tia notices a minor issue regarding the small blue slime she originally brought in to purify the settlement's wastewater and sewage. The creature has rapidly multiplied over time, resulting in various new types of slimes appearing around the area, including normal, red, yellow, holy, green, and black variations. Hiraku assumes they are completely harmless and does not pay them much attention until a massive problem suddenly arises. One day, Tia, Lu, and Leah discover a small red slime emerging from a tipped-over wooden barrel in the storage area. They quickly realize that this single slime managed to drink an entire barrel of their precious alcohol. Since alcohol is highly valued by all the residents, the girls are absolutely furious. They immediately hold a trial for the creature, holding up paddles with red marks to declare the slime guilty. The girls suggest severe punishments, proposing to burn it with fire magic, dry it out in the sun, or lock it in strict confinement. Hiraku steps in to calm everyone down, explaining that the slime is just a simple creature and probably does not understand what it did wrong. He argues that they are being too harsh and successfully pardons the slime from any punishment. From that day forward, the slime becomes a regular guest at their feasts and celebrations, always popping up to join the fun. When autumn finally arrives, the weather cools down, allowing the villagers to get more work done and harvest a massive bounty of fresh crops. Hiraku uses the newly harvested ingredients to prepare a giant steaming hot pot filled with shiitake mushrooms, leafy greens, carrots, and sliced meat. Everyone gathers around the wooden table and absolutely loves the meal, but Hiraku casually mentions that a hot pot would taste even better if they had access to seafood. He explains that ingredients like cod, crab, or monkfish, along with kombu broth, would allow them to make a proper chanko hot pot with miso. Since none of the girls have ever seen the ocean, they are instantly intrigued by the idea of crabs and fish. Florem uses a magic screen to research the ingredients and points out that there is a port city called Shashato located within the demonic kingdom that specializes in marine products. Excited by the prospect of delicious new food, Lasti volunteers to fly Florem to the city so they can ask a local merchant she knows for help. Florem agrees and they immediately set out. Over in Shashato City, the elderly head merchant Michael Garoon is busy working at his desk when his assistant informs him of unexpected visitors arriving without an appointment. His merchant intuition screams that this is a critical situation, and his fears are confirmed when he steps out to see Lasti and Florem waiting for him alongside two muscular lizardmen. Michael instantly recognizes Florem as the daughter of the powerful Chrome family and Lasti as the notoriously crazy dragon. He is absolutely terrified, realizing the political and physical risks of dealing with them are astronomical. Lasti and Florem present baskets filled with high-quality magical apples from the village and ask him to procure seafood in exchange. When Michael sees the glowing, high-grade fruit, his merchant greed instantly overrides his fear. He realizes the profit margins are massive and immediately orders his men to gather the best morning catches from the port. He agrees to personally deliver the goods to the Great Tree Village, and Lasti happily picks him up, flying him straight into the Forest of Death. Upon arriving at the village, Michael is absolutely horrified to see the settlement populated by terrifying beings like the illegal demon spider, killer angels, the inferno wolf, and the vampire princess. Despite his internal panic, Michael sits down with Hiraku 3 days later in the village cabin to formally negotiate. He presents the fresh fish and the requested kombu seaweed, stating his desire to become the official government purveyor for the village to handle all their external trade. Hiraku is impressed by Michael's directness and agrees to review his product list for future deals. Just as the negotiations seem to be going perfectly, Drime suddenly appears in his massive green dragon form right behind Michael. Michael screams in pure terror, politely excuses himself while trembling, and immediately flies away on his dragon escort. Even though the visit nearly gave him a heart attack, and he feels like his body can barely handle the stress, Michael knows the massive profits waiting for him make it the best deal of his entire life. With the fresh seafood secured, Hiraku cooks a proper seafood hot pot, and the entire village gazes in wide-eyed amazement at the steaming dish. Everyone enjoys the incredible new flavors, and Hiraku decides he will ask Michael for shrimp and squid next time. A few days later, Hiraku is working in the forest when another massive white dragon appears in the clear blue sky. The 3 Angel Patrol Squad tries to intercept it, but the dragon easily brushes them aside and charges up a powerful glowing orange magical blast. Assuming the dragon wants a fight, Hiraku hurls his almighty farming tool like a wooden spear. The weapon strikes the dragon directly in the head, sending it plummeting into the dense forest below. Hiraku goes to investigate the crash site and finds a white-haired woman with purple eyes sitting in the dirt surrounded by wolves. She immediately raises her hands in surrender and introduces herself as Hakurin, an ancient dragon and Drime's older sister. She explains that Drime recently got drunk and bragged about giving Lasti to Hiraku as a bride. Since Hakurin is 900 years older than Lasti and still single, she was furious that her younger niece might get married before her and flew to the village just to vent her anger. Drime quickly arrives and frantically denies the claim, swearing it was just a drunken joke for the prosperity of their tribe. Hiraku scolds Hakurin for causing trouble and forces her to roll heavy logs and clean up the destroyed trees as punishment. Hakurin quickly warms up to the village and joins them for dinner in the tavern. She takes a strong interest in the games they play and enthusiastically challenges Hiraku, Lasti, and Drime to a game of mahjong. To make the game more exciting, Hakurin suggests they play strip mahjong, where the loser has to remove a piece of clothing as a humiliating punishment. Hiraku agrees, assuming he can easily beat them since they are beginners. However, the dragons are incredibly competitive and pick up the rules instantly. Hiraku suffers a brutal losing streak, dropping down to his very last piece of clothing while the others remain fully dressed. He starts to panic, wondering if the dragons are using telekinesis or magic to read the back of his tiles, but Hakurin proves the tiles are completely blank. Hiraku realizes it is just his own terrible luck. Just as he draws the perfect tiles to secure a massive double Yakuman comeback victory, he hesitates upon drawing the north tile, which brings back sad memories. In that brief moment, Lasti unleashes a golden electrical aura and wins the round. Defeated, Hiraku is forced to take off his pants while Hakurin and the other girls cheer enthusiastically. Meanwhile, at the Demon Lord's castle, Galgardo holds another emergency meeting with his generals, Bezel and Randon. They receive terrifying intelligence that the ancient dragon Hakurin has also taken up residence in the village. The demons panic, realizing the village is rapidly amassing enough military might to conquer entire countries with ease. The overwhelming stress of the situation causes Randon to leave a formal resignation letter on his desk and flee the castle entirely. Galgardo ignores the crisis, complaining instead that his daughter is going through a rebellious phase and refusing to speak to him. Back in the village, Hakurin decides to move in permanently but proves to be incredibly lazy. Hiraku tries to assign her physical labor like digging holes, but she immediately complains and gives up on the very first day. Realizing she is terrible at chores despite her flawless knife skills, Hiraku appoints her as the village teacher instead. Hakurin stands in front of the classroom and starts teaching the Beastmen children reading, writing, and math. She explicitly tells the kids to work really hard so that they can eventually do all of her work for her, allowing her to just sleep all day. Sometime later, a group of topless Lamia girls with snake-like lower bodies arrives at the village begging for their lives. They explain that Kuro's wolf pups recently stumbled into their dungeon and completely cleared it out, forcing the terrified Lamias to abandon their home. As a peace offering, the Lamias present Hiraku with a decorative sword and chests filled with precious blue magical crystals. Hiraku feels terrible about the misunderstanding and gladly trades some of the village's fresh crops for their crystals. He also politely asks the Lamia girls to put some clothes on the next time they visit, as he finds it very awkward to stare at them. The Lamias happily agree and are so grateful for the trade that they officially form the Lamia Delivery Service to help transport the village's trading goods across the forest. With reliable new neighbors and increasing trade with the outside world, Hiraku decides it is time to expand the agricultural fields even further to support the growing demand. However, deep within the Demon Kingdom, Galgardo's daughter, Princess Yuri, holds a secret meeting with her subordinates in a dark castle tower. She inspects a map and completely misinterprets the entire situation at the Great Tree Village. She believes the village is deliberately amassing a monstrous army to overthrow the Demon Kingdom and assumes they are holding Florim hostage to prevent any retaliation. Determined to save Florim and stop the perceived threat, Yuri sits upon her golden throne and orders her generals to immediately gather their troops and prepare for a massive assault on the village. Bezel immediately meets with his daughter Florim to warn her about the impending attack. He explains that while she has been away, 3 politically powerful noble girls named Rosalind, Klakasi, and Roaju have filled Princess Yuri's head with half-truths and convinced her to target the Great Tree Village. Florim is completely baffled by their absurdity, noting that she has sent plenty of reports detailing the ridiculous power of the village. Bezel suspects the reports were so unbelievable that the nobles simply dismissed them as lies. He adds that Demon Lord Galgardo is too soft on his daughter to stop her, leaving them with a massive crisis. Florim offers to go back and convince them to stop, but Bezel warns that doing so would only make them view her as an enemy of the kingdom. Instead, he reveals that the army of 300 men is mobilizing tomorrow and tasks Florim with finding a way to stop the invasion by displaying the village's overwhelming power without actually mobilizing their main military forces. He knows that if the village's heavy hitters get involved, it will inevitably end with the violent destruction of the entire demonic kingdom. Florim agrees to the plan and quickly enlists the help of Lu, Tia, and the High Elf Leah. The 3 girls intercept the approaching army in the forest, and with a single massive magic beam and a terrifying display of physical strength, they force the entire group of 300 knights to surrender instantly. The knights beg for mercy as Leah casually tosses a massive tree trunk aside. Following the effortless victory, Florim captures the 3 noble girls and brings them to the village. She immediately puts them to work, handling the overwhelming mountain of office paperwork at the town hall. Hiraku notices the 3 new girls standing frozen with expressions of pure despair and asks Florim about them. Florim casually explains that they are acquaintances from the demonic kingdom who have had a change of heart and are now ready to work like their lives depend on it. Hiraku feels they look like they have completely given up on life, but Florim assures him they will be fine, though she strictly asks him to dispose of them if they ever try to harm the village. The noble girls are horrified by her words. Shortly after, Princess Yuri arrives in the village herself. Florim introduces her to Hiraku, explaining that she is just here to observe the village's living conditions. Florim insists that Yuri should receive no special treatment and asks Hiraku to put her to work just like everyone else. Hiraku is a bit confused but agrees to let Florim show her around. Florim then secretly meets with the 3 noble girls and warns them not to blow Yuri's cover, ordering them to treat her as a normal resident. Yuri begins her tour of the village and is absolutely amazed by everything she sees. She marvels at the aquatic plants growing in the flooded fields, the massive water wheel turning without magic, and the enormous apple orchard. She shares some apples with her companions, noting that she usually only gets to eat them at castle parties, while the noble girls arrogantly whisper among themselves about how taking over the village will make their kingdom incredibly rich. However, their confidence is completely shattered when they meet Lasti and realize the village is backed by actual dragons. That night, the 3 noble girls decide they have had enough of the rural lifestyle and attempt to sneak out of the village to escape. Their plan is immediately thwarted when they run into the village's terrifying guardians. They encounter the massive inferno wolves and the giant spider Zabaton, who easily subdue them in a flash of magic. The girls are left completely traumatized and quickly promise Florim that they will never try to escape again, vowing to work as hard as possible on their paperwork to avoid being disposed of. The next day, Florim takes Yuri out to play with the inferno wolves. Yuri is shocked to see Florim treating the notoriously dangerous monsters like cute pets, playfully throwing wooden plates for them to catch. Yuri admits that she was completely ignorant of the outside world and feels terrible for trying to bring war to such a peaceful place. Florim gently points out that anyone who attacks the village should expect to be burned alive by a dragon. Yuri then confesses the real reason she mobilized the army. She gets emotional and yells at Florim for suddenly vanishing from the demonic kingdom without a word, explaining that she heard rumors of Florim being taken hostage and was incredibly worried about her childhood friend. Florim feels guilty and apologizes, promising to keep Yuri in the loop from now on, and the two girls happily reconcile. After clearing the air, Yuri fully immerses herself in village life. She surprises the noble girls by eagerly joining the manual labor in the fields, helping everyone harvest the crops and enjoying the delicious meals afterward. When the time finally comes for Yuri to return home, she thanks everyone for their hospitality. Hiraku and Florim bid her farewell, but they notice that the three noble girls are not leaving with her. The trio insists that they still have much to learn and want to stay to repay the village's kindness, though they are mostly just obsessed with the amazing food and relaxing baths. Yuri returns to the Demon Lord's castle, where she immediately begins taking her political and diplomatic duties seriously. Demon Lord Galgardo notices his daughter acting much more mature and completely panics, assuming she must have met a man and fallen in love. He angrily vows to tear the man apart, but Beazle quickly steps in to calm him down, reminding him that his overprotective attitude will just make his daughter hate him one day. Back at the village, the residents complete their massive pre-winter harvest, bringing in so many crops that they run out of storage space. Hiraku is amazed by the giant pile of radishes. Lasti suggests sending the extra food to her father Drime and her grandparents, the Emperor Dragon Doze and the Hurricane Dragon Raymalin. Hiraku is surprised by the intense titles but agrees to the idea. Lasti also delivers some of the crops to Michael in Shishato City. During her visit, Michael asks her to deal with a massive sea monster that has been attacking his trade ships. Lasti happily obliterates the creature with a powerful magic beam and brings its meat back to the village. Hiraku recognizes the monster as a chanko and uses its meat to make a delicious hot pot for everyone to enjoy. Meanwhile, Hakurin returns from a trip up north and brings back a group of dark-skinned mountain elves led by a girl named Ya. Ya introduces her group as meat-eaters who specialize in fire, explaining that they have been struggling to find food in the mountains. Hiraku warmly welcomes them to the village and offers them a place to stay. Eager to prove their worth, Ya and her elves confidently head into the forest to hunt, but their skills are incredibly rusty, and they hilariously end up falling into their own pit traps alongside the wild rabbits and boars. Feeling terrible about their failure, Ya asks if they can try making pottery for the village instead. Hiraku helps them set up a small kiln, but the local soil proves to be completely unsuitable, and their clay bowls crumble to ash in the heat. Ya refuses to give up and volunteers to search the surrounding area for better clay. She successfully finds a good source and uses it to craft a large batch of perfect jars, cups, and plates, finally earning her place in the village. During her search for clay, Ya also discovers the entrance to a new dungeon up north. A survey team of high elves investigates the cave and confirms the presence of a blood viper inside. The elves are extremely excited by the discovery and immediately rush to Hiraku, begging for permission to hunt the creature. Ya explains that blood viper meat is incredibly valuable because eating it boosts vitality and greatly improves husband-wife relations, making it a perfect fertility aid. Hiraku is completely embarrassed by the suggestion and nervously decides to postpone the hunt until they can discuss it with the rest of the village. As the weather turns colder, the villagers finish building a new men's bathhouse so Hiraku and the male residents can bathe without sharing the women's facility. However, Florim soon catches a group of maids and beast girls sneaking toward the men's bath with tubs and towels in hand. She realizes they are trying to sneak in to wash Hiraku's back and get closer to him. Florim drops her friendly demeanor and fiercely scolds them, warning them that they are the lowest-ranking members of the village and cannot try to sneak their way to the top of the social hierarchy. The girls are terrified by her strict warning and quickly abandon their plan, begging not to be disposed of. Shortly after, Lu falls ill and becomes bedridden. Hiraku visits her in her cabin, extremely worried since he has never had to make medicine for someone else before. Lu insists it is just a slight fever and some nausea, but when Hiraku asks if she has been craving sour foods, she admits that she has only been able to eat tomatoes and fruits recently. Senna overhears the conversation and casually mentions that a woman in Howling Village had the exact same symptoms right before they congratulated her on having a baby. Hiraku is completely shocked by the revelation, finally realizing that Lu is pregnant. The following morning, the village is in a joyous uproar after discovering that Lu is pregnant. Hiraku wakes up later than the maids, who insist on waking up early to prepare everything, so he sleeps in a bit to stay out of their way. He immediately goes to check on Lu and asks how she is feeling. Lu is actually the calmest person in the village about the whole situation and tells him not to worry so much because she is sure everything will be fine. Hiraku then goes around the house to check on things and meets with Anne to hear her morning report. She informs him that their plan to deal with the wine slime worked perfectly. They deliberately left a specific barrel of wine out in the food storage area, and the slime drank the entire thing instead of going after the rest of their precious supplies. After making his rounds, Hiraku heads to the dining hall for breakfast. Since they cannot fit everyone in the hall at once, they split breakfast into 3 groups. The first group includes Hiraku, Lou, and Flora. They are served a soup of daikon radish and spinach along with smoked killer rabbit. Flora looks completely exhausted and mutters to herself about microorganisms. Hiraku asks if she has been sleeping, and she admits that she has not made any progress on the miso production and feels like she is only 20% of the way there. Hiraku tells her to get some rest, but she insists that she just needs to add more of a mysterious pink elixir to the batch. The second group to eat is the maids, and the third group is for anyone who did not make it in time. Sometimes Hakurin, the dragon, does not even make it to the third group because she sleeps in so late. Later, Gran Maria reports to Hiraku that a group of 3 killer rabbits tried to infiltrate the village, but Kuro and the dogs easily eliminated them. Hiraku notes that the rabbits never learn their lesson, but he is glad they provide a steady source of meat. He also realizes that while Gran Maria and the other angels are extremely composed while on duty, they turn incredibly lazy when they are off the clock. They rely entirely on Anne and the maids for their food, and make Daga and the lizardmen handle all their laundry and cleaning. However, Hiraku does not mind since they work so hard to keep the village safe. After eating, Hiraku heads out to work in the fields. He pets Kuro and greets Zabuton and her spider children before using his almighty farming tool to till the soil and channel magical energy into the crops. He notices some tiny black spirits sitting on the leaves of his plants. The normal garden pests from his old world do not exist here, so they have these weird black things instead. Thankfully, Kuro and Zabuton's kids are great at spotting them. To get rid of them, Hiraku transforms his farming tool into a watering can and sprinkles water over the plants, which magically eliminates the pests. He is incredibly proud of how large the fields have become and feels a great sense of satisfaction when he sees all the mature tomatoes, beans, and gourds ready for harvest. When lunchtime rolls around, Hiraku sits down with the villagers to eat the meals the maids prepared. Having a meal in the middle of the afternoon is a very foreign concept in this world. When the High Elves first arrived, they were actually terrified of eating breakfast and lunch because they thought they would deplete the village's food reserves and get kicked out. They used to struggle to even get 1 meal a day, so Hiraku is determined to make sure none of them ever have to worry about food again. During lunch, Daga asks to increase the feed for the cows since they just had calves, and the High Elves report that the crop storage room is almost completely full. Hiraku decides to talk to Florim about selling their excess produce to Michael. Once lunch is over, Hiraku goes right back to work. Since he has enough hands helping with the regular farm work, he focuses on tilling new fields and planting flowers. He transforms his tool into a hoe and creates a garden bed, instantly sprouting yellow tulips and white narcissus to add some color and make the village feel more civilized. He also uses his tool to craft wooden blocks and toys for the Beastkin children. Even though he has 0 construction experience, the magic of the tool allows him to effortlessly carve perfect pieces of wood. Later in the afternoon, Hiraku joins the girls for their daily combat training. Anne and the maids strongly advised everyone to train just in case the village is attacked, and the maids are also worried about gaining weight from all the delicious food they eat. Hiraku spars with a wooden dummy using a training sword, but he gets exhausted almost immediately. He then tries throwing some small knives, but he completely misses the target and realizes he is just not suited for normal weapons. However, when he transforms his farming tool into a spear, he kicks the dummy with such immense magical force that the top half of it goes flying into the air and shatters. The girls are amazed by his power, though Hiraku still has no idea when he would ever actually need to use it. As the sun sets, Hiraku finishes his work and heads home for dinner. The maids serve a new menu item, which is simmered killer rabbit with a sweet honey sauce. When asked how confident she is in the dish, the maid admits she is only about 20% confident. Hiraku asks her to only serve dishes she is at least 50% sure about, but she sternly refuses because they cannot afford to waste any food. Hiraku takes a bite and finds it weirdly sweet, but he smiles and gives her a thumbs up anyway to show he appreciates the effort. During the meal, one of the maids hands Hiraku a letter from Princess Yuri. She writes that she wants to eat more of their apples, and also requests another dress from Zabuton. Hiraku feels she is asking for too much and plans to tell her to stop, but Florim assures him that Zabuton is actually more than happy to make clothes for the princess. After dinner, Hiraku heads to the newly built men's bathhouse to relax in the hot spring. He is extremely glad he forced them to build a separate bathhouse because he could never truly relax when all the women were sharing the same one. Once he finishes bathing, he heads to his bedroom to sleep, but he suddenly feels very uneasy. He senses eyes watching him even though he is alone in his room. He yells for help, and suddenly 4 elf girls pop out of hidden trapdoors in his floor, walls and ceiling. They immediately panic that their cover is blown and scramble to retreat. Hiraku realizes they were just hiding in the walls to keep him safe, but he still decides he needs to seal those hidden doors the next day. Despite the weirdness, he thanks God for his second chance at life and falls fast asleep. The next morning, Hiraku heads down to the village sake brewery to check on Donovan and the dwarves. The brewery is filled with steam as they work the distiller and monitor the massive vats. Hiraku notes that he always assumed dwarves were merry drunks, but Donovan and his crew take their brewing incredibly seriously. Donovan strictly forbids anyone from drinking on the job, explaining that a drunk person tending the fire could easily burn the whole place down. Hiraku tastes a fresh batch of clear sake and thinks it is pretty good, but Donovan violently rejects it. He marks the bottle with a big X and declares that it lost all its flavor and only burns the throat. Instead of throwing it away, Donovan plans to redistill the bad batch and cut it with fruit juice. He then asks Hiraku to increase their grape harvest by 3 times so they can make more wine. Hiraku is slightly overwhelmed by the massive request but agrees to see what he can do. Just then, Senna comes sprinting out of the forest, completely out of breath. She frantically reports that a strange man has managed to infiltrate the village. Hiraku is shocked because the intruder somehow bypassed Gran Maria's aerial patrols and Zabuton's webs without them even noticing. Hiraku rushes to the center of the village with Gran Maria and Zabuton and finds a brown-haired man in a red coat prostrating himself in the dirt in front of the wooden shrine. Lou arrives and is stunned to see him. She introduces the man as Vargrief, the progenitor of the vampires. They all head inside the lodge to talk, and Vargrief happily greets his granddaughter. He explains that vampires usually only continue their bloodline through blood packs, so he was completely shocked when he heard Lou was actually pregnant. He tells her that children are a treasure, and she needs to take good care of the baby. Hiraku asks what it means to be the progenitor, and Lou explains that he is basically their grandfather and is around 4,000 years old. Vargrief laughs and admits he forgets his exact age. He explains that the secret to living so long is to occasionally use magic to erase his own memories, keeping only his name and clan while deleting everything else. He says it was scary the first time, but he got used to it and feels very young since he last wiped his mind 200 years ago. Vargrief then apologizes for sneaking into the village. He originally just wanted to look around and quietly leave, but he was completely drawn in by a powerful presence. He points to the wooden statue of God that Hiraku carved and placed beneath the great tree. Vargrief explains that he actually met God once when he was first born, and God told him to do his best even though he was cursed with an abnormal vampire body. Vargrief has tried countless times to sculpt a likeness of the creator, but he could never remember exactly what he looked like. Seeing Hiraku's statue brought the image back to him, and he is incredibly jealous that the village gets to look at such a masterpiece every single day. He begs to have the statue, but Hiraku refuses since it belongs to the village. Vargrief is crushed and literally slams his head into the table in disappointment. However, Hiraku quickly offers to just carve him a brand new one. Vargrief instantly lights up and enthusiastically accepts. Hiraku gets to work and quickly carves a new wooden statue of the creator. Vargrief immediately drops to the floor and prostrates before it, completely mesmerized by the craftsmanship. He packs the statue into a large bundle on his back and asks Hiraku how much it costs. Hiraku refuses to take any money, stating that God is not something you are supposed to sell. Vargrief understands and promises to figure out another way to repay the village for the gift, and for taking such good care of Lou. He then travels back to his grand cathedral and meets with his head priest. Vargrief orders the priest to take the new wooden statue and enshrine it in the absolute best spot in the temple. The priest is shocked and points out that they would have to move their current main statue, which was crafted by a legendary master sculptor. Vargrief does not care about the fame of the previous sculptor and insists that Hiraku's statue is infinitely better. He also orders the priest to send word to all the other temples to formally respect Hiraku and the Great Tree Village, wanting to secretly support them from the shadows. A few days later, a massive delivery arrives at the village. Vargrief sends an incredibly ornate black and gold grand piano as a gift to celebrate Lu's pregnancy. Hiraku and the lizardmen move the heavy instrument into the dining hall so everyone can enjoy it. A group of the Beastkin girls rush over, completely amazed by the instrument, noting that it is the kind of piano you would only ever see in a massive royal temple. They excitedly talk about playing it, but the moment the lid is closed, they all completely panic. They realize that the piano is practically a holy relic and costs a fortune. They start crying and shaking, terrified that their hands are too sweaty and that if they accidentally break it, their lives will be over. They immediately beg Hiraku to get them a cheap, beat-up practice piano instead. Hiraku agrees and contacts Michael to procure a normal practice piano for them. Once the second piano arrives, the atmosphere in the village becomes much more relaxed. Floram and the demon girls already know how to play quite well, and they start teaching the others. Soon, everyone in the village is taking turns practicing on the pianos, filling the dining hall with music as they enjoy another peaceful day together. As spring passes by, the sun begins shining down stronger each day, making all the vegetables look much brighter and more colorful after sunbathing. Hiraku calls everyone over for a break so they can have lunch. He carefully prunes the top of a tomato plant so it does not grow too tall and realizes he knows much more about farming now than when he first started. Lu calls him over to the picnic blanket, reminding him that he needs to take breaks too. She uses her magic to drop some ice into their drinks, which makes Hiraku feel completely revitalized. He asks her if it is okay for her to be walking around, and she replies that she feels fine and actually heard from the girls in the village that it is important to exercise to keep her body strong. Hiraku mentions that he found out a few of the ogre maids have actually given birth themselves, which is very reassuring since he does not know anything about the process. The others ask Lu what it feels like to carry a child, guessing it must be pretty heavy. Lu agrees, comparing the weight to 2 heads of cabbage. Everyone is incredibly supportive, asking if there is anything they can do to help make her more comfortable. Lu appreciates their kindness and notes that her appetite is back, but the only thing bothering her is that she is not allowed to drink any alcohol right now. This completely shocks the rest of the girls, who groan in unison at the realization. Later, Gran Maria, Kudel and Corone approach Hiraku and kneel before him to make a formal request. They explain that Tia and the others resolved to give up alcohol in solidarity with Lu, but now they are all completely miserable. They ask Hiraku to sell off all the alcohol in the village to remove the temptation, claiming that whenever they eat good food, they just think about how great some alcohol would go with it. Hiraku tells them to calm down and explains that alcohol ages and tastes better over time, so if they tough it out now, it will be even more delicious later. Meanwhile, Donovan and the dwarves approach Hiraku, worried that they did something wrong because no one is drinking their alcohol anymore. Hiraku quickly apologizes for not informing them about the situation with Lu. Donovan assumes they should slow down production, but Hiraku tells them to do the exact opposite. He expects everyone will drink heavily to make up for lost time once the ban is lifted, so Donovan promises to brew as much as possible. As Lu gets closer to her due date, she stays inside the cabin to avoid the strong sun. Tia and the angels visit her and bring a mystical white flower from a snowy mountain that naturally releases cold air to keep the room cool. Ya, the mountain elf leader, sneaks in to give Lu a jar of rare medicinal herbs meant to bring good health and vigor. Lasty drops by with a glowing blue gem necklace from her father's treasure room that helps with magic recovery. Anne presents a freshly made custard pudding topped with caramel sauce, while Lafa gives her a decorative floral wreath to serve as a good luck charm. Flora even brings in 2 bowls of tomato and tofu miso soup, which Lu finds surprisingly delicious. Later, Daga the lizardman visits, feeling helpless because his people are born from eggs, and he has no idea how to assist with a mammalian pregnancy. He desperately offers Lu his blood to drink so she can grow stronger, but she politely declines, joking that her teeth cannot pierce his thick scales. That evening, Hiraku and Lu sit together in their warmly lit cabin, looking over all the wonderful gifts they received. Hiraku picks up a wooden mallet tied with a white ribbon and asks what it is for. Lu explains that Donovan gave it to her, promising it would come in handy later. Hiraku is confused and wonders if a wooden mallet is somehow used for childbirth. Suddenly, Lu clutches her stomach, signaling that the baby is finally coming. The maids immediately spring into action, boiling water and rushing around the lodge with stacks of towels and linens. As Lu suffers through intense labor pains with Senna holding her hand, Hiraku stands outside the room, pacing nervously. He feels completely helpless since there is nothing left for him to do. Needing some air, he walks out to the edge of the forest and gazes at the two moons in the night sky. He remembers his first night in this world when he stood in the exact same spot. Back then he was entirely alone and just wanted to live by himself away from anyone else. But now, he is surrounded by a massive family in a thriving village. He stays outside all night reflecting on his journey. The next morning, Senna and Lise happily report to Anne that the delivery was a success. Hiraku enters the room and is completely stunned to see Lou resting comfortably on the bed, tenderly cradling a newborn baby with short silver hair. She invites him to hold the child. Hiraku nervously takes the baby, making sure to support his neck just as Anne instructs. He notes how warm and surprisingly heavy the baby feels, despite being so small. The baby moves and smiles, and Hiraku realizes that he has truly become a father. He remembers the illness he suffered from in his previous life and hopes his son never has to experience anything like that. He tells the baby to grow up strong, but Lou gently corrects him, stating that they will raise him to be strong together. A week later, Hiraku stands in his fields holding a wooden barrel, proud of how the village has grown since he first arrived. They named the baby Alfred, and while he is technically half vampire, he looks like a normal human boy. Hiraku realizes that the village has expanded from a solitary farm into a massive community with multiple buildings, fields, and diverse residents. Wanting to thank all the villagers for their hard work in building up the community, he calls a meeting with the girls to introduce a new system. He pulls out a small silver coin embossed with a tree emblem and explains that it is a reward medal. He plans to give these medals to everyone as thanks, allowing them to trade the coins for goods or services. Up until now, Hiraku has been manually distributing all the crops, meat, and traded goods to everyone himself. However, with the increasing population, handling every single transaction on his own has become impossible. Flaurum agrees that they need a currency system to manage transactions independently. Hakuran the dragon jokes about measuring worth in barrels of gold, completely missing the point. Hiraku clarifies that switching entirely to currency right away would cause too much confusion, so they will start by using these medals as convenient vouchers. To kick things off, Hiraku gives 3 medals to every villager and 30 medals to both Kuro and Zabuton to share with their large families. Since he has to craft all the medals by hand using his magical farming tool to prevent counterfeiting, the supply is limited. The villagers react to the new currency in various ways. Some immediately trade them for wine, others buy furniture, and some use them to purchase weapons that Drime brought as gifts. A few people simply decorate their rooms with the shiny coins. However, the new system backfires slightly for Hiraku, as it results in a massive influx of orders for custom-made furniture and toys. He ends up spending hours chopping wood and crafting tiny stools and toys for everyone, feeling like he is doing even more work than before. He also struggles to figure out the exact value of a single medal. Senna even tries to give him 3 medals in exchange for a baby of her own. Hiraku quickly shuts down that request, so they compromise by letting her use the medals to rent Hiraku for a day to play with the Beastkin children. Sometime later, the village finally throws a massive feast to celebrate Alfred's birth. The girls are thrilled because they can finally drink alcohol again. Hiraku feels a bit bad for making them wait, but seeing everyone so happy puts him at ease. During the party, Flora arrives carrying the wooden mallet that Donovan gave them earlier. Donovan brings out a massive wooden barrel marked with strange symbols, and explains that he brewed a special new kind of wine just for this occasion. Hiraku realizes that the mallet was meant for cracking open the barrel, not for childbirth. He and Flora strike the lid together, splashing the deep red wine into the air. The villagers cheer and immediately start drinking heavily. Hiraku loves seeing everyone enjoy the feast but notices that Lou is sitting out. She explains that she cannot drink while she is still breastfeeding. Feeling bad that she is missing out, Donovan comes up with a brilliant idea. He suggests bottling the rest of the special wine to age it in the cellar until Alfred is old enough to drink it with them. Hiraku and Lou love the idea and quickly order Donovan to secure the wine before the drunken villagers consume it all. Hiraku eagerly anticipates the day he can share a drink with his son, while Lou tells him that day will come quickly if they keep enjoying their peaceful life. Suddenly, they notice a very drunk Flora joyfully playing with baby Alfred, shouting that she wants him to be her baby. Back in the Demon Kingdom, Demon Lord Galgardo holds a meeting with Beezle, Randon, and a few other nobles to discuss the news of the baby's birth. Beezle states that challenging the Great Tree Village is completely impossible at this point. Randon agrees and suggests they focus on maintaining an amicable relationship. He proposes marrying someone from the Demon Kingdom into the village to secure an alliance and suggests Yuri for the role. However, Yuri's father completely freaks out and shouts that he will never hand his daughter over as a bride to anyone, no matter what. Meanwhile, in a nearby human town, Michael prepares a massive shipment of goods. He tells his assistant to make sure their preparations are perfect because he wants to leave a good impression and maintain their profitable relationship with the village for a long time. Back at the village, Hiraku notices Lhasa acting strangely, but she brushes it off, saying she just had a dream. At that moment, Tia and Gran Maria approach Hiraku to discuss a serious matter. They explain that a large group of refugees who were driven out of their homes by a war are looking for a new place to live. Drime and the Demon Kingdom also reached out with similar requests to house refugees displaced by the conflict with the Full Heart Kingdom. Hiraku asks for a rough estimate of the total number, and Tia reveals that there are over 100 people seeking shelter. Hiraku realizes that taking in that many people would require building an entirely new village. However, the girls are incredibly enthusiastic about the idea, stating that the village saved them, so they cannot just abandon others in need. Hiraku agrees and decides to start planning for Great Tree Village too, relying on everyone's help to prepare the supplies and build a new home for the refugees. Hiraku realizes that taking in that many people requires building an entirely new village. The girls are incredibly enthusiastic about the idea, stating that the village saved them, so they cannot just abandon others in need. Hiraku agrees and decides to start planning for the new settlement. Anne prepares extra food to support the upcoming labor. She focuses on making vegetable-heavy pita sandwiches, stuffing the bread with fresh tomatoes, cucumbers, eggs, and lettuce. She chooses these ingredients because they do not keep well, meaning she can prioritize other foods for long-term preservation, while providing the workers with a meal that is easy to eat on the go. Hiraku takes a basket of the sandwiches to the village office to feed the civil servant girls. However, he finds Rosalind, Roaju, and Klakase completely buried under massive, towering stacks of paperwork. They complain that they cannot keep track of all the food and supplies pouring into the village. The workload is so heavy that they feel sick and cannot even take a break for lunch. Luckily, Floram arrives with reinforcements from the Demon Kingdom. She brings a large group of female students dressed in school uniforms who want to earn favor in high society by helping out with the administrative work. Floram tells them that ensuring the village's administrative work runs smoothly will be a great experience. The girls immediately get to work sorting the records by document type, though a few of the students complain that they were promised all-you-can-eat apples and all-you-can-pet animals. Some of the girls get absolutely terrified when they spot Kuro and Zabuton wandering around the village, realizing the friendly animals they were promised are actually massive, terrifying monsters. With the paperwork handled, Gran Maria flies ahead to scout the route for the new village. She returns and reports that she did not see any danger in the area. Hiraku and the elves decide to build a settlement downstream on the other side of the river. They figure that given the hierarchical relationship between the main village and the new one, putting the immigrants across the river is the safest option. If the new village ever stages a rebellion, keeping them separated by the river will make it much easier to defend the main village's water supply. The group heads to the site and gets straight to work, clearing the forest to make a path. The elves and Daga try to chop down a large tree to clear the land. One of the elves even uses her magic to launch a spinning green projectile at the trunk, but the wood is harder than iron and their weapons just bounce off the bark without leaving a scratch. Hiraku steps up and summons his magical farming tool. He transforms the tool into an axe, generating a sharp magical beam that effortlessly slices the massive tree completely in half with a single swing. Everyone is absolutely amazed by his power as the giant trunk hovers in the air before falling. Thanks to his omnipotent tool, Hiraku easily clears the entire proposed site in no time. They also build a narrow wooden bridge across the river, deliberately keeping it small so large monsters cannot use it to cross over into the village. Hiraku then constructs a canal from upstream to supply the site with fresh water. He sets up a material processing area and works with the lizardmen to prepare massive piles of lumber. The lizardmen mention that they cannot move forward with the building until they have enough wood. Hiraku tells the lizardmen to get some rest while he continues processing the materials. During a quick break, Hiraku carves a detailed wooden statue of Zabuton and places it on a pedestal, though he wishes he had made it a little bigger. Lou visits him with baby Alfred and gently teases him for working so hard instead of resting. She notes that he really loves working, so Hiraku finally agrees to take a break and sits down to have a drink. After a short respite, the construction of the houses begins in earnest. The elves and lizardmen use leveling tools and wooden mallets to prepare the foundations. They prepare the materials according to the blueprints in advance so that everyone can work together to assemble the structures quickly. The elves use their magic to effortlessly lift heavy wooden beams and walls, snapping them into place on the foundations. Hiraku remembers how hard it was to build his first small hut by himself without any nails, and he is grateful for the magical assistance. He makes sure everyone follows strict safety rules, specifically banning anyone from throwing lumber across the site after he catches an elf tossing a board onto a roof. Thanks to their incredible teamwork, a whole row of wooden cabins is quickly completed. Hiraku and the elves look over the new settlement, proud of how fast it is taking shape. Hiraku wonders exactly how many people they are taking in, but before he can get an answer, Tia flies down with urgent news. She tells Hiraku that Draimi just contacted her and is bringing immigrants over immediately. Suddenly, Draim teleports into the village in a huge panic. He brings a massive group of 72 minotaurs with him, led by a tall man named Gordon. Draim apologizes for the sudden notice and explains that the minotaurs were driven out of their home and stranded on the road. He felt the situation was too urgent to wait, so he rushed them to the village. The minotaurs are completely exhausted and have many young children with them. Hiraku knows they cannot discuss logistics on an empty stomach, so he immediately has the maids serve them warm porridge. Nerf the lizard man steps in to help gather the minotaurs' opinions since he used to live with them in the mountains and knows their habits. Hiraku plans to house the refugees in the newly built cabins. However, when Gordon stands next to one of the houses, Hiraku quickly realizes the minotaurs are way too big to fit inside. The tiny rooms and low ceilings are completely impractical for their massive, 2-meter-tall frames. Because of their size, Hiraku has no choice but to temporarily house all 72 minotaurs in the large village guest house, making the building incredibly crowded. Before they can even figure out a permanent solution for the minotaurs, Hiraku receives a magical communication message from Florim's father. He apologizes for the sudden notice, explaining that the war situation changed and he had to use teleportation magic to evacuate a large group of people. Soon, a group of 100 centaurs enters the village. Their representative, a female centaur named Grewald, acts incredibly arrogant and impatient. She demands respect and boasts that she is a relative of the senior steward of the Viscount Beeg family from the Demon Kingdom. Hiraku has absolutely no idea about aristocratic etiquette or noble rankings and just stands there confused. Fortunately, Lashashi Droy steps in to handle the situation. She introduces herself as the second daughter of Count Droy, a noble rank that completely outclasses a mere Viscount. Lashashi firmly tells Grewald that this village is not a domain to be handed over to her and suggests she reconsider her rude attitude since they are refugees asking for help. Realizing she just insulted a high-ranking noble, Grewald immediately drops to the ground, prostrating herself and begging for mercy. Lashashi accepts her apology and agrees to take charge of managing the centaurs since they are technically related to her family's faction. Hiraku tries to place the centaurs in the new cabins, but their horse-like lower bodies make it impossible for them to fit through the doors or maneuver inside the small rooms. The centaurs ask if Lu can use her magic to shrink them down to human size. However, the elves explain that Lu's shrinking ability is entirely unique to her and cannot be cast on anyone else. With no other options, the 100 centaurs end up renting space in the village cowsheds for the time being. Right after the centaurs are settled, another group of immigrants arrives. A group of identical green-haired women wearing white and green dresses approaches Hiraku, carrying a small sentient tree stump with a smiling face. The Lamias found them wandering the dangerous forest and guided them to the village. Their representative, Igu, introduces them as the New Daphne, a rare race of tree spirits. They lost their hometown to severe flooding caused by excessive logging and traveled across the treacherous forest after hearing about the village's incredible soil from Michael the merchant. Igu explains that the tree spirits have the ability to transform into plants to hide from monsters, which is how they survived the journey without fighting. The sentient tree stump they are carrying is actually one of their injured companions who is currently stuck in plant form and cannot turn back into a human yet. Hiraku offers to throw a banquet for them and asks what kind of fruit they want to eat. However, the tree spirits explain they do not eat normal food. They only require clean water, bright sunlight, and fragrant soil to survive. To prove it, they happily walk out into the village's tilled fields, bury their bare feet in the dirt, and sprout flowers from their heads and shoulders. Hiraku tries to offer them the new cabins, assuming they will want large windows for sunlight. But the tree spirits refuse, stating they strongly prefer to stay outdoors so they can soak up the rain and sun directly. Hiraku realizes that despite building a whole row of brand new houses, none of the immigrants can actually use them. The new cabins sit completely empty, while the minotaurs crowd the guest house, the centaurs sleep in the cowsheds, and the tree spirits simply stand motionless in the dirt fields all night. With the village population exploding and everyone living in cramped conditions, the situation becomes entirely chaotic. The elves lie exhausted on the floor of the lodge after realizing all their hard work on the small cabins was mostly for nothing. However, they quickly regain their energy and resolve to fix the problem. Hiraku and the girls agree that they need to completely rethink their architectural designs from the ground up. They immediately start planning to build much larger houses capable of properly accommodating the massive minotaurs and centaurs, determined to get everyone a comfortable home as soon as possible. Hiraku apologizes to the new immigrants for not having suitable homes ready for them right away and asks for their patience and help in getting their people settled. To make the transition easier, he assigns a specific representative to look after each group. He puts Narf the lizard man in charge of attending to the minotaurs. For the centaurs, he assigns Lashashi to handle their needs. Then he introduces a young beast woman named Mam to look after the new Daphne. Mam recently moved to the village along with Senna and was highly recommended for a higher level position. She nervously introduces herself with sweat pouring down her face but enthusiastically promises to do her absolute best to help everyone adjust. Hiraku then explains his master plan for where everyone will live. Since the main village was specifically designed for human-sized beings, they decide to build entirely separate villages for the massive minotaurs and centaurs. This way, it will be much easier for them to live and work comfortably among their own people. They plan to use the exact locations that Leah and the other high elves found earlier while exploring the forest. Setting up these locations requires building completely new roads and irrigation channels, which means clearing a massive amount of the surrounding dense forest. Hiraku asks for everyone's help with the heavy lifting. The elves and dragons eagerly step up to the task, ready to use their magic. However, Lasty and the elf girls use way too much magical power, blasting massive beams of pink and white energy and completely obliterating large sections of the woods. One of the elves even shatters an entire tree trunk with a single powerful kick. Hiraku watches in absolute shock as they destroy everything in their path, leaving behind a scarred path of destruction filled with debris and magical dust. He quickly tells them to calm down and take it easy so they do not destroy the entire forest. He instructs them to refrain from using their full power and to just stick to clearing a dirt path alongside the river for now. While Hiraku and his team are busy building the new settlements, the rest of the women back at the main village spend their time doting on baby Alfred. The maids fold fresh linens for him, and Zabuton the giant spider even knits a batch of tiny new clothes. The elf women note that the clothes are a bit too large for the baby right now, but they appreciate Zabuton's hard work anyway since she is always so hasty to help. Meanwhile, Hiraku focuses entirely on constructing the second village specifically for the minotaurs. Since they are incredibly tall, he designs spacious one-story homes with extra high ceilings. He also builds custom oversized furniture to perfectly match their massive frames. He creates giant wooden chairs that look as big as normal tables and designs special oversized beds with built-in slots so the minotaurs can sleep comfortably without their large horns hitting the headboards. Gordon and the other minotaurs are absolutely thrilled with their new homes, stating that the large furniture makes them feel like children again. They settle in quickly and enjoy their new comfortable beds. Next, Hiraku moves on to the third village to build homes for the centaurs. Because their lower bodies are built exactly like horses, standard houses simply do not work for them. Instead, Hiraku constructs large, stable-like buildings with incredibly wide entrances and exposed rafters. The centaurs mention that their kind has a lot of trouble operating ordinary doors, so Hiraku decides to install large curtains drawn by thick ropes for the main entrances and adds simple sliding doors for them to use on rainy days. A whole month passes quickly, and everyone's hard work pays off as both new villages are fully constructed just before the winter snow arrives. Hiraku meets with Lu, Tia, and the civil servant girls inside the main hall to discuss what they should name the new settlements. Hiraku points at a map and suggests names like Upton, Middleton, and Downton based on their geographical locations, but he quickly admits they do not really sound right. He then proposes simply calling them Village 1, Village 2, and Village 3. Since they had already built an empty village earlier, that one officially becomes Village 1. The civil servant girls immediately agree to these incredibly simple names because they desperately want to avoid the massive headache of rewriting all the official documents and maps they just finished organizing. They then discuss the leadership structure for the new settlements. They agree to leave Village 1 unassigned for now since it is completely empty, but they decide to officially make Gordon the mayor of Village 2 and Gruwald the mayor of Village 3. The girls quickly point out that if the new leaders are called mayors just like him, Hiraku needs a clearer title to properly establish the hierarchy. They enthusiastically suggest giving him grand titles like High Mayor, Great Mayor, or even King Mayor. Hiraku feels completely embarrassed by the ridiculous titles and immediately rejects the idea, preferring to keep things simple and avoid acting too self-important. During this time, the New Daphne approach Hiraku and ask when a village will finally be built for their people. Hiraku apologizes and explains that they decided against building a specific village for the tree spirits since their kind is far more suited to staying put in one place rather than moving into houses. Hearing this, the tree spirits become extremely sad, feeling like their long-held dream of finding a home to set down roots is ruined forever. Hiraku quickly stops them from getting upset and explains his actual plan. Since they can easily communicate with each other over long distances through a form of natural telepathy, he wants to place them at important locations across all the villages to act as permanent watchmen and messengers. The girls think this is a brilliant idea and suggest placing some of the tree spirits in the completely uninhabited Village 1 so it does not go to waste and decay over time. Hiraku gladly agrees, incredibly happy that the empty village will finally serve a purpose. He also assigns the tree spirits to act as natural streetlights during the evenings by using their magical glowing abilities. With everyone finally settled into their new homes, Hiraku tries to assign specific jobs to the residents of Village 2 and Village 3. However, he quickly runs into a major problem regarding their food supply. He realizes that neither the Minotaurs nor the Centaurs are suited for hunting in the forest. The Minotaurs are mostly a tranquil people who avoid conflict, and the Centaurs are exhausted refugees who can barely fend for themselves against the vicious monsters lurking in the woods. Hiraku admits he never realized how difficult hunting actually was, because Kuro's Inferno wolves always handled it effortlessly. He decides it is best to keep the new villagers out of the dangerous woods entirely and asks Kuro and Zabuton to station more of their powerful wolves and spiders in both villages to provide reliable defenses. He also learns that the New Daphne avoid combat entirely by using ambush tactics and hiding in plant form, meaning they cannot hunt large numbers of prey either. Since hunting is completely off the table, Hiraku decides the new villages must become entirely self-sufficient through farming. He helps them till the massive fields, but after some time the villagers notice that none of the crops are taking root. Hiraku is extremely confused until he realizes the only reason he was ever able to grow massive, bountiful crops, regardless of the harsh seasons or bad weather, was because of his almighty farming tool. Its divine power makes the soil perfectly fertile, allows him to plant anything he imagines, and accelerates crop growth instantly. Since he is the only person who can summon and use the magical tool, the new villages have to farm the normal, incredibly difficult way. Hiraku suggests laying down layers of dried straw across the dirt to keep the soil warm against the approaching winter cold. Gordon then steps up and reveals he actually has some real farming experience from helping out in his previous village. Everyone excitedly praises him and starts calling him their farming senpai. Under Gordon's expert guidance, they till deep into the earth and plant seeds for winter wheat, which will sit safely under the snow and be ready for harvest right before summer. Hiraku is completely surprised that they have to wait half a year for a single harvest, realizing he has grown far too accustomed to the instant results of his magical farming tool. Out of immense gratitude for his divine powers and to bless the new crops, Hiraku carves two detailed wooden statues representing the god of creation and the god of agriculture to house in a brand new shrine. However, he mistakenly carves the goddess of agriculture as an old man with a long beard, completely unaware of her true beautiful appearance. While the Minotaurs take full charge of the agriculture in Village 2, the Centaurs use their incredible natural speed to develop an entirely new line of work. They start a dedicated delivery service to efficiently ship goods and materials between the different villages. The adult centaurs handle the regular delivery routes, pulling large wooden carts filled with heavy crates, sacks, and barrels. They often fiercely race each other through the forest at blinding speeds to set new route records. This reckless driving sometimes results in them completely crashing their carts and sending their cargo flying everywhere across the dirt path. Hiraku watches the chaotic crashes and just hopes they start prioritizing safety over speed. Later, Grewald approaches Hiraku and mentions that she noticed he has a normal black horse on his farm. Hiraku explains that the merchant Michael brought it to him a while ago, but he complains that the horse absolutely refuses to listen to a word he says, or let him ride it. He asks Grewald if she can somehow speak to the horse and convince it to finally give him a ride. Grewald explains that she does not speak horse at all, but she happily offers to let Hiraku ride on her back instead. Hiraku immediately agrees, and she takes him for a fast, thrilling ride through the dense pine forest. Hiraku enjoys the bumpy but exciting experience immensely. A few days later, the normal black horse gets incredibly jealous of Grewald's new bond with Hiraku. It suddenly walks right up to Hiraku, acting perfectly friendly, and allows him to mount it without causing any trouble. Hiraku praises the horse and pets it, but Grewald spots them from behind a wooden cabin and becomes furiously jealous. She stomps over and violently demands that Hiraku ride her instead, claiming the normal horse is a dangerous wild beast that will hurt him. The horse comically bares its teeth at her in defiance, and the two get into a massive, heated argument over who gets to carry Hiraku around the village. To settle the intense dispute and keep everyone perfectly happy, Hiraku promises to alternate and ride each of them every other day. Meanwhile, Mam tries her absolute best to look after the injured new Daphne companion, who is still stuck in the form of a small tree stump with a simple carved face. She asks the stump if it needs anything at all, or if it has any questions. The stump simply looks up at the bright blue sky and notes the weather. Suddenly, a bright, swirling blue magical aura completely surrounds the stump, and it magically transforms into a cute, fully mobile wooden creature, finally completely healing from its severe injuries. As life finally settles down across all the villages, Hiraku relaxes under a large sun-dappled tree with Lou and baby Alfred. Despite the perfectly peaceful atmosphere, Hiraku admits he is deeply worried about their future. He points out that the entire village's survival heavily relies on the extreme convenience of his almighty farming tool. He worries about what will happen to everyone if he ever catches a cold, or gets sick, and cannot work the fields. Lou smiles warmly and tells him not to worry so much, reminding him that they can easily deal with those problems if they ever actually happen. She tells him to just relax and enjoy his life, since he will not be retiring carefree anytime soon anyway. Hiraku completely agrees and happily plays with his infant son. However, Hiraku soon remembers another incredibly serious problem facing the Great Tree Village. The village population is absolutely overflowing with women, and there are hardly any men at all. He originally hoped the massive influx of new immigrants would perfectly solve this demographic issue. He talks to Gordon, noting that out of the 72 minotaurs, 28 are male. Hiraku hopes they might mingle and marry the village women, but Gordon quickly shuts the idea down. He explains that due to their massive size, it is strict custom for minotaurs to exclusively marry other minotaurs. Hiraku realizes this leaves the centaurs as the absolute last option. He approaches Grewald inside a cabin to seriously discuss the matter, noting that they have 30 males, even though they are currently just young boys since the adult men are still off at war. He nervously asks her if centaurs ever marry outside their own race. Grewald says they do not ordinarily do so, but she completely misunderstands his intentions. She loudly declares that she is single and passionately offers herself to him, assuming he wants to take her as a prize for providing them a home. Hiraku frantically waves his hands and tells her to relax and calm down, clarifying that he is absolutely not asking for that kind of relationship. He simply wants to ensure the centaur men and women will eventually pair up and thrive among themselves, so the village can have a perfectly stable future. Grewald gets deeply flustered but remains overly eager to serve him. But that's where this part ends. Subscribe to catch the next one as soon as it drops.